rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Andor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1!
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
You know that old expression about a broken clock, right? Even a broken clock is right twice a day. And it seems like, based on the headlines this week, that the YouTube commentators that have long been claiming that Kathleen Kennedy's days were numbered at Lucasfilm. I mean, her days have been numbered for longer than most people's careers at companies is when people have been counting down the days. But the headlines are there, and this looks credible. This isn't some guy on YouTube wearing a mask telling you that Kathleen Kennedy is perhaps about to exit Lucasfilm. We'll have an analysis of that news coming up, of course, along with, my gosh, the big season 2 trailer of Andor hit this week, and it has caused a lot of conversation. So we'll definitely get to all of that and do our patented shot by shot, scene by scene breakdown. Plus, here's something we haven't heard about in a long time. You remember Star Wars Detours? Yeah, that Star Wars Detours animated series by Seth Green. It was one of the last projects that George Lucas worked on. And, Seth has been talking a little bit about that recently. We'll have some audio highlights of that as he kind of talks about what the status of that project is and really why we'll never see it. So anyway, that and a whole lot more coming up on a very, very exciting episode of Rebel Force Radio. Thank you all for hanging out with us this week. You're not going to want to miss this episode. So strap in for the next couple of hours for the best in Star Wars conversation with me, Jason, and with me, as always, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Wow. What a slow week for Star Wars news, let me tell you, man. What are we even going to talk about this week? No, it's been pretty big. I've been kind of amazed at the amount of really big Star Wars news that has dropped thus far in the first 2 months of 2025. I'm really shocked. I mean, we've heard about casting rumors about big names like Ryan Gosling and films being shuffled around and the release slate and all of this stuff telling us about the future of Star Wars. But gosh, does the future ever seem so uncertain now with news that Kathy Kennedy reportedly is going to be stepping down from her post as head honcho at Lucasfilm. We'll analyze that news and maybe even offer a little bit of a report card for Kathy's tenure at Lucasfilm. But, she's had a lot of hits, a lot of big successes, and she's really had some big swings and misses along the way as well. And we'll discuss all of that stuff. It's been really, really busy as far as Star Wars news goes this week. We got a new trailer for Andor Season 2, which I'm really starting to get very excited about. I told myself March 1st is when I'm going to begin my Andor Season 1 rewatch, just to prime the pumps, to get ready for Andor Season 2. So I get all the nuances. I get all of the Easter eggs. I'm fully plugged into Andor. Because how many series have we been through since Andor Season 1 has come and gone? My goodness. We had a Bad Batch animated, a couple seasons of that. We had, of course, the infamous Acolytes, Skeleton Crew, a third season of Mando. It's been pretty busy for us as Star Wars fans over the last few years, and I got the scars to prove it. So I also have some great memories too along the way too as a Star Wars fan. I'm certainly not going to give Kathy Kennedy an F in my report card as we assess her career with Lucasfilm. But I'm not giving her straight A's either. So we're kind of mixed. It's kind of mixed. We're sort of in the middle of the road, I think, right now with Star Wars.
Yes, we're going to be fair, and the hyperbolic nature of discussions involving Kathleen Kennedy, and I understand it. She's a polarizing figure in Star Wars, and anyone that was going to take the reins over from George Lucas, especially when you look at the corporate merger, the acquisition of Lucasfilm, I think anybody in that role had a big hill to climb, and fans were going to be very, very particular and watching that individual like a hawk. But at the same time, Kathleen Kennedy, as we'll talk about, didn't always do any favors for herself. She made problems where she didn't have to make problems and walked headlong into them. So, but anyway, we'll get to all of that here in just a bit. But we have a little follow-up, Jim, from last week when we were sharing highlights of Mark Hamill's interview with the Smartless podcast. And Mark was talking about the auditions, and he mentioned that Terry Nunn was a part of that, one of the two groups as they auditioned the three principals. And so follow up to that.
Yeah, right. The name Terry Nunn immediately rang some bells for me as Mark Hamill was talking about the final, the people who are considered to be the very finalists for the role in Star Wars. There were 2 sets of 3 George Lucas was considering. And Mark explains all of this, and we'll talk about the alternate pick for Princess Leia, who does happen to be Terri Nunn, who is a well-known musician. And so let's just hear what Mark had to say. We played this clip last week, but I added a little additional stuff to it that they came back around and started talking about Terri Nunn a little later in the conversation. And that's stuff we didn't air last week. So here's Mark Hamill on Smartless.
There were 2 sets of 3. And Marcia Lucas, George's wife, said when he was packing to go to London, he hadn't decided between the 2. I mean, there was no mix and match. It was me, Harrison, and Carrie, or Will Seltzer, Terry Nunn, and I forget now who was Han Solo. And she took credit. She said, I'm the one that suggested he go with you guys.
That's great.
That's amazing.
And we would have had Freddy Krueger out there swinging around a lightsaber.
I mean, right? And that would have been, imagine all the scratch marks on Vader's cape.
No, actually, it would have been Will Seltzer.
Oh,
and,
yeah?
And Terry Nunn she was in a band, I can't remember.
Yeah, Terry Nunn.
Terry Nunn, she was in, not Joy Division, I don't know. Yeah. You Google it. But I mean, it was, like I say, it was cast as a set, there was no mixing and matching.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Right. You came as a package.
Berlin. She's the singer from Berlin.
That's it.
The band Berlin.
It.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go. Will Arnett, quick on the Google. Now, Berlin was a band I remember them from like the days of when music videos really started to become popular in the early to mid 80s. And she was in a band called Berlin, and I remember their song, No More Words. It was a hit. I remember the video of her riding around in a car, singing the chorus out the window, No More Words. And I find it so interesting that she had a connection to Star Wars via the old screen test from back in the day. She actually did participate in a read-through of some early script pages with Harrison Ford. You can, of course, find her auditions on YouTube. All of the Star Wars auditions have leaked. And Terry Nunn, here we're going to check out her screen test with Harrison Ford. So check this out.
Well, all the data banks in R2 are still secure.
Then I think that we're due the reward that you offered, and I trust it'll be substantial considering what we've been through.
Now look, when R2 has been safely delivered to my forces, then you get your reward. You have my guarantee.
What's the little droid carrying that's so important?
Okay, the plans and specifications to a battle station with enough firepower to destroy an entire system. Now, our only hope in destroying it is to find its weakness, which we'll do from the data I stored in R2. Okay, now we captured the plans in a raid on the Imperial shipyards, but we fell under attack before I could get the data to safety, so I hid it in R2 and sent him off.
Well, where are you taking us now?
The fourth moon of Yavin. I've given the coordinates to Chewbacca.
They'll follow us. They let us go. They're going to follow us. They'll destroy your hidden bases. Yeah. They'll destroy the whole system.
Right, I know they'll follow, and they'll bring the Death Star too. But our only hope is to destroy it before it destroys us. Right? Hiding is useless now. Look, with the Death Star, they will continue to destroy systems until they've found us. So we have no alternative but to process the information and use it while there's still time.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you hear George at the end. Okay, great.
Great, wonderful.
There was a lot of dialogue that they compacted later, which is, thank goodness. And nothing against Terri Nunn. She's very cute. But she's playing it very small. And I think that's one of those qualities that actors that are just destined for greatness and for a lot of big roles and notoriety, they just know. Harrison just had, even at this time, a presence, a command in his voice. He was playing to the camera in a sense. He wasn't looking at the camera, but his everything was big. She was very insular, very inside, almost speaking at a low volume as if they're just having this little private conversation. Not the kind of big, more melodramatic acting that we're used to from Star Wars, that's for sure.
And it's just sort of how she peppered her conversation with little bits of verbal, I don't know, verbal diarrhea that just softens up the whole performance when she says, okay, so look, it's going to be like, okay, so,
it's trying to sound natural.
Trying to. Yeah. But obviously struggling with what she's reading as dialogue, totally out of context. She, Chewbacca, she's not really, in the moment. But there was just something about her presence that George Lucas liked, and she was actually considered. She was really the second choice for Princess Leia. Should Carrie Fisher have turned down the role or been unavailable, then Terri Nunn would have been Princess Leia, according to what Mark said, according to the info that Marsha Lucas gave him. And it seems like Marsha was the one who really influenced George to pick Mark, Harrison, and Carrie, as opposed to Will Setzer, who Mark name checks in the interview, who I have no idea who he is, but his screen tests are on YouTube as well. And he would have made a very different Luke Skywalker, as far as Will Setzer seems like somebody who would be more comfortable and more natural in like the Welcome Back Cotter classroom, as opposed to on board the Millennium
He's a sweat hog?
Falcon.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, there was just something about him that made me sort of feel that way. But the Han Solo could have very well been Harrison Ford in that mix. And Harrison is really sort of phoning this in. It doesn't appear like Harrison is necessarily auditioning. It's just his natural attitude is what really made him seem like the guy to be Han Solo.
Well, even Harrison Ford at level 1 is certainly outshining Terri Nunn in this case.
Well, perhaps that's why Terry moved on to a music career.
Right.
And the reason why I'm bringing her up is because last week when we were talking about this, it suddenly dawned on me, oh my God, my wife, Wendy Snyder, she is a radio talk show host. And she interviewed Terri Nunn back in 2016 when Berlin was going to play the City Winery in Chicago. So naturally, if any music video stars of the early 80s roll through Chicago, they come to Wendy Snyder's studio. So I dug up an interview. This is from 2016. It's a radio interview with Wendy Snyder and Terri Nunn. And obviously armed by information I gave Wendy.
I had a feeling that Wendy didn't just pull that from
right.
from show prep. I had a feeling that she was given that information, that intel, and it wasn't from her astromech droid. It was from her husband.
And, having access to the Wendy Snyder archives. Heck, I have access to Wendy Snyder herself, but I also have access to the old archives. And I was able to find the Terry Nunn interview. So we have a couple of clips here of Terry Nunn in the studio with Wendy. And Wendy lays the Star Wars screen test questions on Terry.
Your path could have taken a very different route. You're an actress, and you could have been portrayed in a very big movie. We have your audition for a particular role who had cinnamon buns on each side of her ear. Can we play a little of this?
Of course.
All right, here we go. This is you and Harrison Ford.
There's only one Wookiee in the show, though, right?
Okay, anytime you want.
Well,
That's
all
George
the
Lucas.
databanks in R2 are still secure.
Well, and I think that we're due to the reward that you offered. Can we start again?
He's terrible.
Forgive me.
Harrison Ford is
He'll never
terrible.
get the job of Han Solo.
And he hated me.
Wait, explain this,
Did he
because
hate
there is.
you?
You can find it on YouTube. It's Terry Nunn Star Wars.
Yeah, you
Star
can
Wars
watch it.
audition.
It's hilarious.
It's awesome.
He looks 15. I look 12.
So how did this come about?
I was an actress in my teens before Berlin. I met John in Berlin when I was 18 years old. Jeez. So that's when my life went that way. But before that, I was in television, trying to do films, trying to do anything. And this job came up, and we sat in deck chairs. You can see it in the YouTube video. We sat in deck chairs reading these lines, R2-D2, grab the fader, hurry. And, I don't know what that is. What's an R2-D2? The dark star, Vader is coming. What? And Harrison doesn't know either. So it's just funny to watch it because we're really trying to mean it, but we don't know what we're talking about.
And that was intentional. They're keeping you in the dark and just here read these lines.
Because it hadn't been made
Right.
yet. So we didn't know what we were reading about.
Well, no one knew except Mark Hamill. He's like, I knew what this was going to be. This was going to be huge. But he was the only guy that knew at the time. Even George didn't know. George hoped. But wow. So Harrison, she doesn't really go into the why she's claiming that Harrison hated her. She kind of goes into, because as soon as Wendy heard that, she's like, wait, what? Yeah. Harrison Ford didn't like you. And then she just kind of talks about the, how she got the opportunity and all of that. But I'd love to know a little bit more. Was Harrison was he a prima donna there at that point? Or did he just not suffer fools and amateurs lightly?
Well, we have another clip where Harrison Ford is definitely the subject of conversation here.
Oh, good.
And Terry talks a little bit about Harrison Ford. She starts off this clip telling what I think is a very fictional recount of how Harrison ended up in Star Wars. She's close, but she doesn't really nail the actual facts of the story. And then she does discuss a little bit about why she feels like Harrison Ford didn't care for her.
He was the carpenter in George Lucas's house, and he said he was an actor. So George said, well, come down and read with these people. He wasn't planning to give him the job.
And he got the job.
And he was great. The best Han Solo
He was
you could imagine.
spectacular.
He was hot.
Yeah. Why do you say he didn't get along with you?
He didn't like me at all.
Why?
He was just kind of, you could see it in the YouTube video too. I don't know. He was just arms crossed, just kind of looking away like, yeah, whatever, So.
I think you made him nervous because he screwed his lines up and then he's like, can I do this again? I think a pretty girl sitting next to him, I think you made him nervous, if you want my honest opinion.
You think?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think the problem is she just met Harrison Ford. I think Harrison Ford has pretty much been the same guy since day one, and he's not into all of the niceties, and he just he had his arms folded, and he was a professional. He's sitting there saying, God, I really got these chairs I got to make back in my workshop. I got to get back to that. But I don't think he was intimidated by the pretty girl. But the idea of that he was this carpenter that just came in, that's I feel like that is a little bit of myth and legend, that he was just this carpenter that happened to be in the right place at the right time, because he'd already done American Graffiti for George.
Right. Well, of course. He wasn't a carpenter in George Lucas's house. He was a carpenter, and George Lucas owned a house, and that's about as factual as it gets. But he was, famously a guy, and still is to this day, a guy who likes to use his hands. He likes to tinker around with things. He likes to build. And yeah, he had a career as a professional carpenter, which he did in between acting gigs to keep his head above water and continue to audition. But yes, he did land a role in American Graffiti, and he definitely was on George Lucas's radar. But the way he ended up in Star Wars was they were using the offices of famous Hollywood producer Fred Roos, who worked on The Godfather, etc. And they were using his offices to conduct these screen tests. And what had happened was Harrison wasn't in the orbit for any of these screen tests. But Fred had hired him to come and work on a door in the office. At the same time, the auditions were taking place, knowing that George would be there, and then Fred could suggest that Harrison would read the lines with the other actors. So in essence, Harrison was never screen testing or auditioning for Star Wars. He was part of the process as the actor in which all of the other actors read their lines against. So, and by
he was
doing
the constant, everybody else was the variable.
He was the constant, yes. And if you look at the screen tests, you'll see Harrison is reading lines with all of these other actors and actresses, like William Catt, like Cindy Williams, like Terry Nunn. And Terry was probably like the 49th of 50 actresses he had worked with that day. And so he was probably, a little like whatever, arms folded, indifferent. But those are the elements of the Han Solo character, which Harrison naturally possessed, in which Fred Roos knew that George Lucas would see that connection right away, without making Harrison necessarily audition, but just having him there during the audition process as simply an actor for those auditioning for the role to play off of. And so then at the end of the day, George was just like, well, Harrison is Han Solo. I've heard him say those lines 1,000 times now, and he can't get it. Same with Anthony Daniels. George was going to remove Anthony Daniels' voice from Star Wars, but because he had heard Anthony do those lines so many times, he didn't hire another actor to dub in. He used Anthony Daniels. It's just a natural process of things, and being around people who have this natural instinct for being able to find those connections between actors and the roles in which they land. And Fred Roos was one of those guys. And that's how Harrison Ford ended up in Star Wars, and Terry Nunn did not.
So in other words, Fred Roos, even though George had worked with Harrison on American Graffiti, Harrison was not top of mind for George. As he's putting together Star Wars, it was Fred Roos that put him back in George's orbit, because he was working there in the facility, in the building. And George, once George saw him delivering the lines and, as you say, auditioning with all of those people, he did become the constant. Also, if you watch the Icons Unearthed documentary about the making of Star Wars, where you get to hear a lot of Marsha Lucas, she was Team Harrison right away. She loved him in American Graffiti and really was championing him throughout the development of Star Wars as well. So I think between Roos and Marsha, It was inevitable.
Oh, yeah. And just Harrison's natural ability to,
of course, yes,
to embody that role just by being good old Harrison.
Right.
How many Wookiees are in this? Just one, right? Can we start over? It's like, God, this guy is Han Solo, for crying out loud.
Right, the grumpier he gets, the better he gets, you know?
Can't wait to actually pair him up with the Wookiee. This is going to be fantastic. This is things George is thinking, you know?
Well, that's cool. I love these little time capsules. We've been sharing them quite a bit lately, and the feedback is always really, really good. And so thanks for pulling that together. And how cool that Wendy actually got right from the horse's mouth with a little help from you, I should say. So
yeah, right. A little influence there.
All right, well, let's check in with you all, the listeners of Rebel Force Radio, see what's on your mind with a little listener mail.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message?
Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hey guys, this is Austin from Raleigh, North Carolina. After I heard about, I think it was Jason going on the 9-episode binge, I decided, it's been a long time since I watched all of them. And over the past week or two, I decided to kind of sit down and watch them. And something I didn't think would happen, but I definitely had a little bit more of an appreciation for the sequels. I think that they did stick to the Star Wars blueprint a lot more than I realized the first time around, or maybe second time around watching them. I do think The Last Jedi kind of sticks out as the almost like a missing chapter, like episode 7 and 9 seem to go along, and The Last Jedi is kind of doesn't really fit in. However, it still does follow that story, and I think it was Jimmy mentioned recently how it really was a good story. It's just not fleshed out well, and if they gave us the reasoning behind a lot of what occurred in the movies, it would have been better. And with that being said, the one thing I wonder for both of you guys, and maybe a good conversation that could come, is what do you think would need to happen to revitalize the sequels? Something we saw with the prequels, as myself being a prequel kid, they were always amazing movies, but I know a lot of people that were older than me did not enjoy them when they came out, and over time they've really matured. I think a big part of that was because of the Clone Wars show, with all those stories being fleshed out. So kind of along that line, do you think there's anything similar like that would revitalize the sequels and really finish off that story? Whether that's an animated show, whether that's, kind of how they've been hitting towards, like, The Mandalorian, Boba Fett, showing the cloning of Emperor Palpatine and how that all began. Is this going to come up in Mandalorian Grogu? Just some things to think about. Wondering what you guys thought. As always, love listening to you guys. Listen to you guys on my way to work right now. So hoping to hear your thoughts. Thanks. Bye.
Well, thank you, Austin. Been through Raleigh, North Carolina many times. Beautiful, beautiful part of the country. So what could raise the profile of the sequel trilogy? Jim, this is not the first time that I've started to hear people start to thaw out to the sequel trilogy. You were talking about it in our own Jedi Council. We've been talking about it. I think that the sequel trilogy is going to follow a similar, not exactly the same path as the prequel trilogy, but a similar path, because I think one of the issues that plagued both the prequels and the sequels is this disappointment phase. There's a phase where you realize that the story that you've been telling yourself, or in the case of the sequel trilogy, the story that you've been reading in books and comics for decades, it's not the story that they're presenting as the canonical version. We talked a lot about this during the prequel era. It wasn't what I expected. I didn't expect Anakin to be 8 years old when we first meet him, all that stuff. But what starts to happen over the years is acceptance. You start to accept, well, this is the story that we were given. These are the movies that we were given. And so that just sort of natural organic process, I think, does raise the profile of these films. I think it's going to take away some of the sting, some of the bitterness. Nostalgia is going to start to creep in. We're already at 15 years from the release of The Force Awakens. So,
10 years.
10 years from Force Awakens. Oh God, 15. I don't want to age
2015.
myself that much. 2015.
Yeah, right.
So 10 years, over the course of the next 10, when we get into, that 10 to 20 years, I think that nostalgia is really going to start to build. But I think that's part of the process. There's a natural healing and acceptance that happens, that also happened with the prequels. But what could really help would be what I think Austin is talking about, is what could Lucasfilm do? What projects, whether it be an animated series or a live action series, do we need to see in order to make the sequels more palatable and stitched more cleverly into the overall canon? For me, it comes down to two things. One, I need to see the rise of the First Order and how it sprung from the ashes of the Empire. And I have to see the fall of Luke Skywalker, because those two things were not talked about. They were talked about very briefly, if at all, in the sequel trilogy. Last time we saw Luke, he was at his absolute apex. He was on a high. He had just overthrown the dark side. He had brought balance back to the Force. He had reconnected with his father, although briefly, and proved to the spirits of Obi-Wan and Yoda that there was another way. He didn't have to destroy his father. He could do it through, he could bring him back to the good side through love, acceptance, forgiveness, all of that. The next time you see him, he's a bum. He's a hermit. He hasn't talked to his best friends or his sister in years.
Cut off from the Force.
And then you've got this whole other not remnant, but this entire other faction in the galaxy that seems to be every bit as powerful as the Empire was, which is just 180 degrees from the last thing that we saw. So I just feel that it was too big of a leap. And if we could get an animated series, if we could get more of information through shows like The Mandalorian and maybe the films that are coming, it will all help to make the sequel trilogy more palatable and feel more part of the overall canon. I just feel like there's too many missing parts and there's too big of gaps.
It definitely feels like we are missing a trilogy somewhere along the road here.
Yes.
And, and the fact that the Star Wars original trilogy era, along with the actors that populated it, like Mark, Harrison, and Carrie, they were sidelined for 35 years. So I think with that in mind, I think the best way to really resuscitate the sequel trilogy or add a little bit more substance to it is to take advantage of the fact that you still have your core group of actors young and in their prime, and you need to strike while the iron is hot. You need to take advantage of their youthful edge and create more stories with them. And I know a lot of people are really frustrated hearing that kind of talk because they just want to close the door on the sequel trilogy altogether and pretend it doesn't exist and just sum it all up as one big giant failure. But I've always been someone who was supportive of the idea of living in reality and dealing with the Star Wars that actually does exist as opposed to the Star Wars that exists in our heads. No matter how awesome that scenario may be in your own mind, it's not living in reality if you want to continue being a fan and to continue analyzing what's going on and still acknowledging the fact that there is potential to add more substance to those films by creating more films based on the outcome of the sequel trilogy.
What's really
You know?
interesting about what you're saying is that my whole idea is to go back in time and fill in gaps. And your idea is just to keep going forward and pushing these characters further that will then hopefully uplift and make their origin stories, which we could consider the sequel trilogy being that, their origin stories all that more impactful. So you're looking forward. I'm kind of looking back.
I think you're on a fool's errand if you want to try to fill the gaps with animation, novels, or comics. It's frustrating, and it really goes nowhere. And the way I can say that with a certain amount of confidence is because I believe that's exactly what Lucasfilm has been trying to do since The Rise of Skywalker came and left the theaters. Is they've been just trying to drop in these little kernels of information along the way through these ancillary storytelling methods to try to apply some substance to the haphazard mess that is the sequel trilogy.
Now, would you include the
haphazard mess,
the Moff Gideon cloning plot line and things like that? Is that what you're talking about when you're saying just dripping and dropping these ideas?
Well, I mean, it's a cut to the chase already. You know, come up with some definitive reasons for the return of Palpatine, for whoever Rey is supposed to be. I mean, come up with some more definitive, add some substance to it. Don't just tell us it's that way just because. And that's what Lucasfilm has been really fond of for the last 10 to 12 years it's that way just because. What you're doing is providing us these bullet points without applying any substance to the story. So I think the best way to do it is, yes, to move forward and to have these characters grow and evolve. And as they discover more about themselves, we as an audience discover what's fueling this whole thing to begin with. The whole Palpatine as a clone and all of that stuff. I mean, it's there. It's there. And don't tell me fans weren't enthusiastic when at Star Wars Celebration 2019 in Chicago, they rolled out that trailer for Rise of Skywalker and Ian McDiarmid came out on the stage with his mic drop moment. He's like,
roll it
again.
Yeah,
roll it again. But I mean, the place was going nuts.
Right.
Yeah. So what happened? Well, I think what happened was J.J. Abrams abandoned a lot of the ideas that Rian Johnson threw down in The Last Jedi. And Rian Johnson discarded a lot of the ideas that J.J. Abrams was laying down in The Force Awakens. And I think it became a passive-aggressive game of tug-of-war between J.J. Abrams, a bad robot, and Rian Johnson and Lucasfilm about where to take the story next. As a matter of fact, I think that tug-of-war even started before Rian Johnson took the reins of The Last Jedi. I think that tug-of-war was already underway between J.J. Abrams and Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
And that's why we are where we're at now with sort of this messy and consistent sequel trilogy that really makes, it really makes the patchwork storytelling of the sequel trilogy makes the prequel trilogy patchwork storytelling look like Shakespeare in comparison. So, I mean, it can be fixed though. I really do think it can be fixed.
Because that's what Austin's really asking here. Yes, is this redeemable? And I know there's a lot of big fans out there. There's a lot of fans that say it doesn't need to be redeemed for me. I love it. Okay, but what Austin is talking about is can fandom at some point come together around the sequels the way that we're seeing fans coming together around the prequels and have, with open arms accepted Hayden Christensen back and excited to have Ewan McGregor back and excited about the idea of Natalie Portman coming back. Will it get to that level?
Well, fans sure seemed to be excited at Star Wars Celebration London when it was announced that there was a new Rey movie in the works. So,
she's a hometown girl there. That helps.
True. I mean, well, she's a hometown girl anywhere as long as Star Wars is your hometown. And I do like her. I see a lot of people complaining about Rey online and stuff, but I think there's still potential with that character. And I think if executed the right way, it could be very effective with Daisy Ridley in that role. But
I agree with you.
I'm just being an optimist,
Yeah,
That's
I agree with you. I like the idea of moving forward. I think that me, I don't really care too much about the comics. Although Mac and I were actually a couple weeks ago, Mac and I were texting back and forth about Star Wars comics as I was reading. So if you can imagine, mind blowing.
I've never been so excited. Because that is a corner of Star Wars storytelling that we really rarely touch upon here at RFR. And I was just thinking, wow, if that door gets open for Swank, this could unleash an entire new edge of conversation, Star Wars conversation.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that this new Vader series, and I'm going to swing back around and wait. I think there's another issue. The second issue should be out already, right?
Next week.
Next week it comes out. Okay. All right.
Yes,
well,
on the 5th of March.
I will definitely be reading it. I will definitely be reading
The Legacy of Vader. The Legacy of Vader. And this issue will have the depiction of Anakin Skywalker. Darth Vader returning to Tatooine and killing Watto.
Boy,
beheading Watto.
They started talking about that so long ago. Like it's by the time the issue comes out, it's like it's not even worth talking about.
Well, I'm just curious to see how that's depicted, in what sort of context that all goes down.
Yeah, what leads up to
so many people jump to conclusions all over the place about it. And I just want to see what goes down in that situation.
I like in that first issue when Kylo Ren force levitates the two chunks of Snoke out of a box and then throws him out of an airlock in front of all of the...
That is, though, yes.
Hux, that was something.
Yeah, it wasn't enough for Kylo Ren to put himself in front of all the First Order troops to say, Snoke is dead. I am now the grand ruler, or whatever they called him, supreme ruler. I am now
supreme leader. Yeah.
That wasn't good enough for him just to say it.
No.
He brought the corpse of Snoke with him and floated him out with the Force and threw him through the hangar door of the Star Destroyer. That's good stuff.
It was great.
Now, like I would have flipped out if they did that in the Last Jedi, but that would have been amazing. And remember, the way that saber bisected Snoke, it also cut his hands off too, because of the way he was sitting in that throne. So when it went forward, it not only did it cut him in half, it cut his hands off.
Good eye for detail there.
Yeah. So I think the hands also got thrown out the Star Destroyer.
So he was in 4 pieces. Snoke was in 4 parts.
But I do love the artwork in all of those comic books, even if the stories are a little soft. I do enjoy looking at all of the artwork. And next week, Legacy of Vader will provide us with Vader murdering Watto in a fit of revenge. I wonder if when he approaches him, he says, "Chut, chut, Watto." And it's like RFR fans go crazy.
All right. Well, thank you, Austin. That was a great voicemail. Led to some really fun conversation. Before we go further in the program, we got the big headlines coming up, including the story about Kathleen Kennedy's retirement and the Andor Season 2 trailer. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what's going on over on Patreon, which is the best way to get more Rebel Force Radio in your life.
Yes, patreon.com each and every week. full show video of the main weekly RFR show, along with bonus podcasts like RFR Q&A, the Babu Freaks, RFR RPG, plus ad-free shows and early bird access. So everyone on Patreon, at least in the Insider Plus and higher tier, have early access to each episode of RFR completely 100% ad-free. But speaking about those bonus podcasts, this week we have RFR Q&A number 235, The Posters of Star Wars, A New Hope. Really, really cool conversation I have with RFR VIP Peter Beiser, who returns to the Q&A to break down all of the official U.S. poster releases for the original Star Wars films. And he even walks us through the home video releases like VHS and Blu-ray. It's a really fun conversation, brings back a lot of memories. The only place you can hear that conversation is at RFR on Patreon at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Now, I have a public service announcement to make about Patreon. So Patreon has an app, okay? And if any RFR memberships are purchased through the Patreon iOS app, aka the iPhone app for Patreon, it will, as of this week, it will now include a 30% Apple App Store fee for any membership, any tier on RFR on Patreon. And I'm really kind of frosted about this. So as a result, I am requesting all users of the Patreon app to ditch the app. And if you are interested in hooking up with Patreon, RFR on Patreon, use the Patreon website in your browser, or the Android app works fine. The Android app doesn't charge the extra fee. The website, if you look at it in the Chrome browser or the Safari browser, you will not have to pay the extra 30% fee to support Rebel Force Radio. By the way, we don't see any of that 30% fee. That all goes directly to Apple just for using their app. So don't use their app. Access the Patreon page, patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Access it via your browser and avoid the BS Apple fee. So thankfully, I don't think many of our supporters use the Patreon app. I don't think the Patreon app is even that good. So I find it to be very limited. I always access RFR on Patreon via a browser. And I just go directly to it via the internet. I don't use any apps. So please don't use the Patreon app if you have an iOS phone, because you'll be paying 30% more. That's ridiculous. Screw you, Apple. So
I had no idea. I personally, obviously, I'm a Patreon of Rebel Force Radio, but I'm a Patreon of others, and my whole tech stack here is all Apple products. And so knowing now that if I subscribe or pledge money as a Patreon to a content creator through the app, that I'm getting a surcharge of 30%, yes. And that goes to Tim Cook and the gang at Apple. That's
right.
This has been a problem with the App Store and the apps in the App Store for a long, long time. This 30% cut that they want to take on everything. It's going to, if they keep pushing this is going to end up in the courts and in the high courts. And I don't think it's going to go well for Apple. I think they're going to, it hasn't gone well for Apple over in the EU. So I think they really need to do a little soul searching and figure this out, because this nickel and diming for a company that might be the first $1 trillion company at the rate that it's going is just, it's nuts. It's nuts to me. Bye.
And it's really putting the squeeze on independent creators and podcasters like you and me, Jason. So, I mean,
yeah, that's crazy.
That's not fair. And it ultimately screws over our listening audience. So,
yeah,
please support RFR on Patreon. Just don't use the iOS Patreon app. As a matter of fact, I mean, you can continue using that Patreon app if that's what you prefer, but just don't make any purchases through it.
Right.
Go use your browser and access the Patreon website that way. It works just as well, if not better. It's way more functional on my smartphone than using the Patreon app. So just a word to the wise. Support RFR, but don't pay the upcharge to Apple. I mean, I'm kind of insulted. They're really feasting on our coattails here, and that's really not cool. So,
like they need the money.
Yeah, exactly. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
I saw Star Wars, and I'm not a movie expert, but I think it's safe to say it was the greatest film of all time.
Rebel Force Radio.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
Well, like we said at the top of the program, I don't know if this is good news, but Jim, there's been talk and claims and outright prayers for what we're about to talk about from many, many folks in the, I guess we would call it the pop culture and the Star Wars punditry, especially over on YouTube. We have some friends over there. But this Kathleen Kennedy is going to be fired, or Kathleen Kennedy is about to be thrown out on a rail, has been a constant every time there's a new project, whether it be a feature film, or maybe it's a film that gets postponed or canceled, or it's a new Disney Plus series that fails to show up in the Nielsen streaming ratings and all of that. Here they come. Kathleen Kennedy's about to be fired. Her days are numbered. Any moment. I hear that it could be as soon as this week. I mean, you hear all of this stuff. But in this instance, it sounds like there's some real credibility to these claims when you get an outlet like The Hollywood Reporter talking about it, saying that they are hearing through Puck News. By the way, I did some... It's not often that Hollywood Reporter credits another news agency for a scoop like this. So this is what's telling me that, especially when you know as close as Lucasfilm, and let's face it, Lucasfilm and Hollywood Reporter and Vanity Fair, Variety, they're all very, very close. So this is, I think, a legit leak, or all these outlets would be saying we've confirmed and Lucasfilm has said or Disney has stated. But Hollywood Reporter is crediting this scoop to Puck News, and Puck News was founded by the former editor-in-chief of the Hollywood Reporter, who's no longer with the company. A lot of different Hollywood big shots from Hollywood Reporter, CNN, The Atlantic, Politico. So Puck News isn't just like, when I heard that, I'm like, what kind of website is Puck News? But it's a pretty big deal, and they're very reputable and have a lot of reputable people on their team. So they're saying that they have heard through their source that Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm since 2012, is planning to step down by the end of this calendar year, 2025. And again, this information was reported by Puck News and has since been covered by a lot of different outlets, from the San Francisco Chronicle to the Hollywood Reporter. Now, there is talk that, and I saw this percolating as well, that a source that is close to Kathleen Kennedy has described the reports as speculation, and that no official decision has been made. But again, Jim, when I see the Hollywood Reporter running a headline that says Lucasfilm boss Kathleen Kennedy expected to retire this year, something tells me where there's smoke, there's fire, and that we will see the end of her reign as president of Lucasfilm this year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she has a foot out the door just based on all the legitimate news sources and journalists who have been reporting this. Sure, Puck News was the first to drop it, but as soon as they did, everyone else with their sources finally felt comfortable enough to run with it. So that's what's happening here. And when news like this breaks, obviously it's a concern to Disney, because it affects the things that they prioritize the most, notably their shareholders. And I think with news of this magnitude being reported across the board by every reputable news outlet that's out there, without any sort of pushback from Lucasfilm outside of this vague thing that Variety and CNN have been reporting about, another source tells us that this announcement is premature and not confirmed yet. That's because Kathy wants to be in charge of her own legacy and master of her own domain, and she wants to make the announcement. But obviously, the shareholders have to be concerned. That's a pretty high-level shift in the overall corporation for not just Lucasfilm, but for the Walt Disney Company in general. So you'd think that there would be immediate emergency triage going on here to confirm that Kathy is staying on and she is not going to be making any announcements about her retirement. But I think it is happening and it's going to happen soon. Just because, like I said, the response from Disney has been very muted as far as this statement.
Oh, it's non-existent. Bob Iger has said nothing. No other high-ranking Disney executives have said anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think this is the end, perhaps, of her career in the spotlight, and she wants to be the author of it. And I don't blame her for that. But
no,
it's very hard to keep secrets in Hollywood. And as important of a figure as she is in the entertainment business, not just from the standpoint of being CEO of Lucasfilm, but her whole history. I mean, she's been a very, very powerful and influential person in the making of films. You go down her IMDb, it's basically the top 20 movies of all time. I mean, it's insane. So her legacy, Star Wars notwithstanding, is enormous. But of course, the question, you're right. I mean, the stock, they've got to massage this and they've got to make this palatable to the shareholders. So right away, there are names that are being thrown out as possible replacements for Kathleen Kennedy. Some of them are obvious. Kevin Feige, that's being thrown out there, and that's been a rumor for a while. Jon Favreau, again, another one that has been tossed around. Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni, his name's being thrown out. And here's another one. And this is the one that I think personally has the most credibility, and that's Simon Kinberg. And the reason that I think that Simon Kinberg could perhaps make the most sense is that, Kathleen Kennedy sort of started her reign with 3 new Star Wars films, episodes 7, 8, and 9. And with Kinberg being helming a Star Wars trilogy of his own, why wouldn't he be the guy that is going to shepherd Lucasfilm into the future? Much like Kathleen Kennedy did with her Star Wars trilogy as producer. So that's the one that my money's on. I don't see Kevin Feige coming over. I don't see Favreau coming over. And I certainly don't see Dave stepping up when Dave is still, I think, making his bones when it comes to just his ability to swim in the live action world.
From what I understand, largely industry insiders still consider Dave Filoni to be a television producer and not necessarily a feature film producer, because Dave Filoni's never produced a feature film in his life. And I have a sense of nervousness about his proposed Mandalorian Mandoverse wrap-up film, just because of the fact that Dave has had no experience directing a film at all. That's the same reason why I have hesitation about someone like Bryce Dallas Howard directing a Star Wars film, because she's never directed a film before. Outside of a documentary she co-directed with her dad. And Charmin Obaid-Chinoy, also extremely unproven in the realm of major motion picture, live action, scripted, tentpole, high budget storytelling. She has virtually no experience whatsoever, unless you count a couple episodes of Ms. Marvel, which I don't. It's very interesting you bring up Simon Kinberg. Simon Kinberg, kind of the odd man out at Lucasfilm following the first season of Rebels, and he kind of got shuffled out of there. I think largely due to a lot of bad blood from the Fantastic Four film that he was producing. But he certainly has kept his head above water as far as his career goes, showing he's a true pro. And of course, we know one of his key collaborators, Derek Hoffman, has just entered the hallways of Lucasfilm as the vice president of live action development for Star Wars. Longtime collaborator of Simon Kinberg. The two of them worked together on the X-Men franchise, and Derek was an associate producer on X-Men Days of Future Past, and he seems to have settled in now into the executive suite at Lucasfilm. And now we're hearing this news. Of course, Rain Roberts just recently left. She apparently was being groomed by Kathy to eventually take over when Kathy was ready to step away. And I think at age 71, Kathy Kennedy is really considering her experience with Star Wars to be rather complete. She certainly has achieved a lot, and she certainly has failed a lot. That's why she has a very mixed report card. Can we go through the live action productions that Kathy is overseeing for Lucasfilm? Well, I have 15 live action, 14 live action productions, plus a couple of amusement park attractions here. But right. I mean, starting with The Force Awakens, I'm skipping the animated stuff. So, but okay, The Force Awakens, obviously, you have to give her a passing grade with The Force Awakens.
That's a home run right there.
That's a home run.
Yeah.
The Last Jedi, box office success, but proved to be incredibly divisive in such a way that Kathy Kennedy and the folks at Lucasfilm never foresaw. They were caught blindsided by the negative reaction to The Last Jedi. And you know this for a fact because they had announced Rian Johnson was going to take Star Wars into the future with his own trilogy.
Right.
They announced
Episode 8, a whole new trilogy.
And they announced that before The Last Jedi came out. After The Last Jedi came and went and made a lot of money, not as much as The Force Awakens, of course, but it made a lot of money and was incredibly divisive. And that was not lost on the people who really control everything.
I mean, if The Force Awakens gets her an A+, I think The Last Jedi has got to be like a B- or C+.
Well, I mean, we'll just have to say, I'm not really giving them letter grades. I'm just saying pass or fail.
Wow, you're harsh. Pass, fail.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I'd have to say, I have to give the letter grade of F to The Last Jedi.
Fail.
Because it didn't establish anything for the future of Star Wars. As a matter of fact, it can really be pinpointed as the moment everything went off the rails. So we got that. We got The Rise of Skywalker, which just, to me, seemed like they were waving the white flag. There was very little merchandise to promote The Rise of Skywalker in terms of like action figures. I mean, of course, there was all the obligatory merch that you normally see with the Star Wars release, but it was a little muted. And it seemed like once The Rise of Skywalker came and went, Lucasfilm was fine with letting it just die on the vine. And it ended up making half of what the Force Awakens made.
Fail.
So I got to give it a fail. Rogue One, despite the fact that it was a production nightmare, and Tony Gilroy, who was brought in to save the day, said when he got to Lucasfilm, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. You still have to give it a passing grade because it made a ton of money, made over $1 billion worldwide, and it is relatively considered by most Star Wars fans in the know to be the best of all the feature films produced for Disney Star Wars. So I give it a passing grade.
Pass.
Yes?
Yes. Pass.
Solo, I mean, there's no way you can look at that by, I know it has its fans, but you have to give it a failing grade. It was a nightmare of a production. She fired the directors as they were nearing the end of principal photography, brought in Ron Howard as some sort of Hail Mary pass, but it didn't affect the box office whatsoever. The box office created the first Star Wars flop ever. Now, you could point at The Last Jedi for maybe priming audiences to be anti-Star Wars in 2018 in the wake of The Last Jedi. I think The Last Jedi did a number on Star Wars, and I think Solo paid the price for it. So you got to give it an F.
Easy.
Yes.
F. Easy F. Fail.
Now we get into the streaming era. Mando season 1 and 2, big hit, massive success, passing grade all the way.
Easy.
Way to go, KK. But, of course, that just fell into her lap. Jon Favreau brought it to her, and he and Filoni were I believe he and Filoni were conspiring behind the scenes for months, if not years, prior to that pitch to Kathy Kennedy to make The Mandalorian a TV show.
They spun it that serendipity was such that they were both thinking of the same concept at the same time. And, living in the real world, we know that that's probably not just something that was left up to chance, that they were working on it together, maybe separately, but separately together.
But Kathy's more than happy to take all the credit in the world when it comes to teaming up Favreau and Filoni. That was her call 100% of the way. Listen, I know how to manage upwards. I know how to make my boss believe that my idea was his idea. All I want is the idea just to get the green light. That's all I care about. And I know Favreau and Filoni, being the savvy showbiz veterans they are, probably operate in a very similar fashion. So Mando season 1 and 2, pass, and Mando season 3, despite some of the criticisms we can give to it, it still generated massive viewership. Maybe not as big as it was in season 1 or 2, but it was definitely a success for Disney Plus. So Mando across the board, all good. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I can't give Kathy a pass or fail for this. Just the fact they brought Ewan McGregor back to play Obi-Wan Kenobi, to me, is a huge success. The viewership was there for the Obi-Wan series. So, but I know it was like a lot of hardcore fans have big issues with it, like the chase with Flea and little Leia in the forest was, devastating to some people.
Yes.
But to me, and I mean, there was like just silliness being presented to us with the Kenobi series. The biggest crime of the Kenobi series is the fact that it occasionally, I shouldn't even say occasionally, I'd say more often than not, would shift the focus away from the core of the story, which is about Darth Vader and Ben Kenobi. They shifted it away to some no-name inquisitor that we're supposed to care about. And and little Leia, while I really love little Leia, and I thought the actress was great and everything, she was a distraction and taking away from the focus of the story. And the focus of the story was Ben Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and that's it. There shouldn't have been any of this ancillary BS floating around there at all. It was distracting. But a lot of people watch that Kenobi show. Ewan McGregor came back into the fold, and so I got to give it a pass.
And Hayden,
yes,
and Hayden,
and Hayden,
well.
and Hayden for that matter. Good call. Good call. The Boba series, again, one of those things that some fans have their panties in a bunch over because of a Vespa chase that lasted about 20 seconds. The show still was a very effective Mandalorian season 2.5.
Right.
And it brought Luke Skywalker back. It brought Ahsoka back. And, you know, whether you love or hate what they did with the character of Boba, they presented a lot of cool stuff in that show. And there were a lot of eyeballs on it. A lot of people watched that show. And it created a buzz. And for crying out loud, they flew the slave one into the mouth of the Sarlacc. So for that, it gets a pass.
Yeah, they rode a Rancor down the streets of Mos Eisley. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and the Rancor keeper was Machete. So, I mean, come on. You can't just out and out say that it was a failure. I give it a pass. Andor. A lot of Star Wars fans felt like it was too dark. It wasn't fantasy enough. It wasn't uplifting enough. But critics sure loved it. And I think a large part of the core of Star Wars fandom really got into it, especially by the time Cassian was thrown into prison with Kino Loy. And that was just awesome storytelling. It's got a season 2. And with the critical acclaim, even though the viewership numbers weren't quite there, but the fact that it did live on to get a season 2, which is becoming like the rarest thing to happen to Star Wars series, I have to give Andor a passing grade.
Of course, definitely. Agreed.
Ahsoka didn't quite get the numbers you thought it would get. And the story was haphazard and patchwork. I think Dave Filoni's maybe lack of experience in the realm of being a showrunner for a live action show with a budget like that, and the breadth of the story, I think that damaged Ahsoka a bit. And I think Dave's inexperience showed. There were big ideas being presented in that, but the viewership wasn't there. The storytelling was patchwork, but there still is a season 2 coming, which could redeem everything. So I'm going to give Ahsoka an incomplete grade.
All right, I can go along with that. I was worried that you were going to give it a pass, and I was going to be like,
no, I can't.
No,
I can't do
give
that.
Yeah.
And there might be a lot of subjective stuff going on here in my grading, but
I've agreed with everything so far. I would definitely,
good.
I would definitely speak up if I disagreed with everything. I'm on board with.
Which leads us to The Acolyte. And The Acolyte was ambitious. It was aiming high, but I think a lot of Kathy Kennedy's skills of mismanagement were very obvious on the screen for The Acolyte. Leslie Headland turns in a script. Oh, this is a nice first draft. It's a great Star Wars story. Now go make it a Leslie Headland story. Whoops. Swing and a miss. And we saw what Leslie turned in after that, emboldened by Kathy Kennedy and her creative direction. The Acolyte does not resonate with the majority of Star Wars fans and got canceled a month after its final episode. So we have no choice. It has to get a failing grade, big time fail. So yeah, not only did it fail, it has to stay after school for the next 2 weeks in detention. Skeleton Crew, high quality, Jude Law, tight storytelling presented by very solid storytellers, but yet didn't generate viewership numbers that move the needle even a little bit, which is shocking and sad. And I hope at some point general audiences will come around to Skeleton Crew. And I think the only way that could happen is if a season 2 gets announced. Maybe it just hasn't found its footing with general audiences yet. But all of the qualities of a great show exist with Skeleton Crew. So I think I'm going to give this one another incomplete grade because we don't know the status of it. Will it live on? I don't know. What do you think, Jason?
That one's a tough one. I think
that's a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's got.
I understand why you would give it the incomplete. I think the incomplete score or grade is a nice compromise because there's a sense with both of those. Well, in this case of Ahsoka, we know there's a second season coming. If Dave doesn't pull it together with season 2, then Ahsoka is going to be a fail. If there was no season 2, Ahsoka would be a fail. In terms of Skeleton Crew, I feel like it was a return to form in a lot of ways. And so I would say, even without a season 2, I would give Skeleton Crew a pass. I would give it a pass. Well, I think it stopped the constant trashing and piling on of those in the pop culture punditry. They really didn't have much bad to say about Skeleton Crew. Not that matters to me, but it does get amplified out there, and it does, I think, hurt the Lucasfilm brand, the Star Wars brand, when they really, really are driving hard against a project that they don't like, such as The Acolyte. So with Skeleton Crew, I agree with the incomplete, but to me, it's also a pass.
All right. Well, Kathy's report card is improving now with Administrator Swank giving her a passing grade on that. And I'm fine with that. I signed off on it too. So
okay. All right.
She does pass. Skeleton Crew does pass. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. One of the biggest box office flops of all time. Despite the fact that I didn't necessarily hate it, but I felt like it was unnecessary. And I felt that way about the film the day it was announced. I said, what are we going to be seeing? Indiana Jones in his 80s, during the 80s? I mean, what's going on here? They gave us the late 60s story, and Harrison seemed up to it. And I was happy to see him return as Indiana Jones, but that's subjective stuff. Objectively, you have to give it a massive fail because it just flopped. It flopped. Galaxy's Edge at now this might be more of a Bob Iger report card here too, but Lucasfilm was heavily involved in the development of Galaxy's Edge, and the fact that it's there and it's not going anywhere, I have to give it a passing grade.
Galaxy's Edge getting a passing grade.
Yeah, it should. What do you think? You've been there.
I've been there.
The cantina.
Yeah.
Jason, you only remember the cantina from
No, I'm not going to be too hard on it. There's things that they could have done or could do to make it better. I like that they're trying to evolve it. I like that we're getting characters like Mando and Grogu and now Luke Skywalker. So that shows me that they are willing to sort of break this precious canonical view of Batuu and where it falls in the timeline and just make it a Star Wars land, which it should have been from the beginning. So I'll give you the pass. We have to talk about the hotel.
It could have been better. It could have been better. All right.
Been better, but it's all right.
The Star Wars Hotel, the Galactic Star Cruiser, in business for about a year. And it seems like the only people who went there were a bunch of shills who got a free ride. I have to give it a massive F.
Yeah.
For, you may have gone there. You might be sitting there listening to this podcast right now saying, I went there and I had the greatest time of my life. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the hotel closed a year later. It just didn't connect, and it didn't work for a lot of people. So, wow. Well, to add all that up is going to take some counting, which I'm not going to do, but it appears that Kathy largely has mostly passing grades. She has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flat out Fs from the Rebel Force Radio administrative crew who was in charge of this. But I'd even get to the fact that she made a ton of announcements for things that never happened.
Well, that's what I've got a list right here. Okay, so real quick, we'll just run down. We've got the Benioff and Weiss Star Wars trilogy axed.
Didn't happen.
Didn't happen.
Well, they were taking a gamble on these guys because they were hot from Game of Thrones,
right?
And then apparently they flaked on Lucasfilm. They flat out flaked, and they walked away from the deal.
And they signed another deal. They signed a deal with Netflix.
Yeah, for like $250 million or something.
Right.
But I know that it was early 2018, right after shortly after they announced that Rian Johnson was helming a trilogy. They said that Lucasfilm did make an official announcement that the Game of Thrones guys, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, were set to helm a series of films. They never said trilogy. They always said series of films. I've seen it being reported time and time again, a trilogy, but they always just were very specific, series of films.
Yeah.
And Benioff in 2023 said that here's what he said about what they wanted to do. They wanted to do a story about the first Jedi, basically how the Jedi Order came to be, why it came to be, the first lightsaber, etc. David Benioff said this a couple years ago, said the series would have explored the very origins of the Jedi Order.
Oh, yes.
Hey, James Mangold, ring any bells?
Yeah.
Because now he's developing a film called Dawn of the Jedi, and it will take place, what did they say, like 25,000 years before?
Because he doesn't want to be beholden. He doesn't want to be beholden to any of the canon. He's made that very clear in statements that he does not want to have to worry about the trappings. I get that. I understand that it can be very, very limiting for a creative type. But yeah, so this Benioff and Weiss, there could be elements of things that maybe they talked about or provided to Lucasfilm that could show up in this Mangold thing. The Rian Johnson trilogy, they've never really come out and said that it's not happening, so it's still sort of in limbo. But that's been talked about since 2017.
Before
Rogue
the release of the last Jedi.
Rogue Squadron announced in 2020, canceled in 2023, and then miraculously back on the board, I guess. We haven't really heard from anybody, but there were rumors that it was back on, and that was when they had these dates that they needed to fill up, these theatrical release dates.
It was the director who said that she was back
Patty
working
Jenkins.
on it.
Yeah.
Patty Jenkins. She said she was going to turn in a script to Lucasfilm. So that still has some life to it, I guess. So bring on Rogue Squadron. They announced that at that big shareholders event in December 2020 when they announced a whole bunch of things. But they later made it seem like it was canceled, and then they uncanceled it last year. So where are we going?
There was also the Kevin Feige movie that he was going to produce, and he was going to work with Michael Waldron. Remember that? That goes all the way back to 2019, and then in 2023, that was when Kathleen Kennedy said, "Oh well, we never really talked about very seriously. We just mentioned blah 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 blah."
She seemed a little frosted by that whole concept of Kevin Feige doing a story. So
maybe there's some rivalry there.
I was reading her body language.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was asked this was in Anaheim at Star Wars Celebration 2022. I remember watching that interview she did where they asked her about the Kevin Feige film, and it almost seemed like she snapped at the interviewer, which I've seen Kathy do. She said that was only revealed in the media. Well, it was revealed to the media by then a Disney exec, Alan Horn, was way up at the top of the ivory tower.
Right.
He announced it in September 2019, saying that this mysterious Star Wars film was going to be put together by Kevin Feige. Then, Michael Waldron, who was the guy who did the Doctor Strange flick, he was tapped to write it from what industry trades were saying. But then when Kathy was asked about it, she said that was never happening. There was never any ideas surrounding
that. Was
that.
just a fabrication of the reporting press. But you're right to remind everybody that was Alan Horn, and he was the head of Disney Films at the time.
Right. I mean, hello. But she said we never discussed an idea. And she said, if Kevin Feige actually did come up with something, she would be all ears. But that never really happened. That's what Kathy Kennedy said. And then in November 2023, Feige said, no, it's not happening.
Yeah.
It's just not happening.
Taika Waititi. There's another one. Taika Waititi goes back to 2020. And as of... I guess the status, we could call it unclear. He's made comments over the years about, I owe them a draft. I owe them something. But beyond that, there's just been nothing even remotely definitive about that. I don't think it's going to happen.
The last time he talked about it was like a couple of years ago. And if I recall, he said something like, I don't want to rush it. He said, I'm just going to let it bubble along the side and see if anything happens. But his reputation's taken a few hits since it was announced 5 years ago that he was going to be making something. And he apparently doesn't really have anything too much of substance.
Yeah, right. Isn't that the problem, though, when they go after these people that are the flavor of the month? I mean, it's not going to take long. I mean, go with somebody who's established and shown that they can at least keep their reputation for longer than a year as the next golden boy or golden girl. Rangers of the New Republic, that I'm not really. Yes, I want to fault Kathleen Kennedy because I don't want to get into the whole Gina Carano drama, but I don't think that Rangers, I think had the Gina Carano drama not unfolded the way it did, Rangers would have happened. I don't count that as a canceled, failed, lack of administrative strength for Kathleen Kennedy. I think that there were other extenuating circumstances there. So I'm not going to, I'm not throwing that in there. Josh Trank's Boba Fett film. Josh Trank, again, proved to be very, very problematic. And I, for one, am glad that Josh Trank didn't get a chance to do his Boba Fett film. So I think it was canceled for good reason. Star Wars Detours, that really wasn't a Kathleen Kennedy move, I don't think. Would you?
No, I think it was.
That? Yeah, you throw that at Kathleen Kennedy.
We have some stuff coming up, recent comments that Seth Green made about Star Wars Detours. So let's hold off on our conversation until we hear the quotes from good old Seth.
Even if you take that one out and you throw out the Josh Trank, you still got 6, 7 major projects with major players that were announced or were strongly suggested in the press as happening, and they were either canceled or they just didn't come through. So my question is, when we look at this pass-fail, how do we include this in Kathleen Kennedy's report card? It's easy to look at the projects that happened, but we've got to look at sort of this chaotic mess that seems to have unfolded over the last 10 years under her leadership. And
you're not even including the fact that the Obi-Wan Kenobi thing was supposed to be a film trilogy,
right?
And not just this sort of half-baked streaming series. You're not including the fact that Colin Trevorrow was deep into development for episode 9, and the plug got pulled on him for reasons we still don't even understand. A filmmaker named J.D. Dillard was working on a Sith film for Lucasfilm.
I don't remember that one at all.
Yeah.
I don't remember that one at all.
Dillard. He's a guy who is responsible for films called Sweetheart, Devotion. And he was with writer Matt Owens, who wrote the Luke Cage series. He was set to write the film. And November 2022, he confirmed that his film is no longer a thing, not for his lack of trying. But some people were saying that it was a Sith movie, partly inspired by the Star Wars TIE Fighter video game, the PC video game. Deadline reported a lot of the film would have taken place on Exegol, the planet where Palpatine and the Sith were hiding out.
Interesting.
Of course, Guillermo del Toro was deep in development in a Star Wars film, a Jabba Godfather type film. And David Goyer was set to write that, the guy who wrote Man of Steel. He was set to write that, but it all just sort of fell apart. And Justin Simeon was supposed to do a Lando film.
Right. Oh, Lando. Oh, how did I forget Lando?
Which Donald Glover revealed that he's now writing. But that thing's been on the back burner. That was announced in December 2020, along with A Droid's Tale, which was supposed to be some ILM Star Wars film that it was unknown when she announced it, if it was going to be a feature film or a series, and it's never been heard of again since she made that announcement. Lord and Miller were supposed to direct the solo film. We talked about that. The Charmin Obaid Chinoy thing has been in developmental hell for years. So it's a pretty huge dance card she has here. I mean, if you just look at the Disney 2020 Investor Day live stream event, happened December 2020. They announced The Acolyte, Rangers of the New Republic, a Willow series, a film called Children of Blood and Bone, A Droid's Tale, Lando, Ahsoka, the Taika Waititi film, a new Indiana Jones film, Star Wars Visions, The Bad Batch, and Andor. Out of all those, 7 out of 11 actually happened. So that's not too bad of a batting average, but it's... You know, when you tease the audience and make promises for things that never happen or even ever get mentioned again, you start to lose confidence. You lose confidence.
I'm sure that anybody that works in the entertainment business on the end of creating things, they all know, and I'm sure that our own Jedi Council would be reminding us that all studios have this type of drama. The difference is that Lucasfilm tended to, it didn't take much for them to want to grab somebody from backstage at a Star Wars celebration, throw them on the stage and say, guess what? They're making a Star Wars project. It was just not controlled. The lack of control over the press, the press relations, I should say, the PR was amateurish at best, and not becoming of somebody with Kathleen Kennedy's years and years, decades of experience in the business. So when you look at the score, the pass fail, we've got 7 pass, we've got 6 fails, we've got 2 incompletes. And then we've got this litany of projects that were started, then stopped, and then in some cases started again, or you never heard of them again. I can't bring myself to give her a passing grade overall. I just can't. The damage that she's done to the reputation of the brand, the damage that she has done to the legacy of Star Wars is, I hope, repairable, but it's going to take a lot of work. So,
yeah,
this half of the Rebel Force radio team is saying that Kathleen Kennedy, for me, gets an overall failing grade.
Yes, unfortunately, when you add it all up, despite the fact that some of her highs were truly high,
yes,
but the lows and the amounts, the pure quantity of lows is overwhelming and kind of embarrassing for her and her legacy as far as being a studio head at Lucasfilm. You know, somebody told me a long time ago, you don't ever want to replace a legend. You want to replace the replacement. And I'm amazed Kathy Kennedy, as the replacement of a legend, has lasted as long as she has. It must be just pure stubborn will or lack of backbone by Disney executives. But I think when you look at the report card on her, I think something should have been done a long time ago. It's being set up that she is going to retire, but it could be a suggested retirement. And I use the term suggested very mildly. And she might be, it just might be the natural best time to get her out the door. What does this mean for the projects she's announced that appear to be in the pipeline, like that Charmin Obaid Chinoy film? I think it's quite tenuous. I think it's all on very thin ice right now, especially with rumors circulating now that Marvel is eyeballing Daisy Ridley for a role in an upcoming Spider-Man film or something. I've seen talk of this, and that could be the concession for her. That could be reparations maybe for this Rey film that they've been dragging poor Daisy Ridley through for a couple of years now with absolutely no movement. She hasn't even seen a flipping script, for crying out loud. And that might be just sort of like here's your runners-up prize. We're going to put you in a Marvel film, Daisy. So, but I mean, I would like to see Daisy Ridley return to Star Wars just so maybe some of the damage from the sequel trilogy can be repaired with better storytelling featuring the same characters. So we don't know. It's all very, and also with Kathy Kennedy moving on, who's going to replace her? This is a situation where it's like, be careful what you wish for. It might actually come true. And the replacement might be way more clueless than Kathy ever was.
Right.
So
the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. So
I just think at the end of the day, Kathy never really understood Star Wars. I don't think she got it. I don't think she was really into it at all, without having any sort of intimate or personal connection to Star Wars outside of being a film executive who is now in charge of it. She just never, to me, had that connection. She made a lot of the wrong hires. She made a lot of obvious mistakes and then doubled down on those mistakes. And she always seemed blindsided by the failures and never, ever willing to admit to them.
Never took responsibility for anything. Bob Iger took more responsibility than she ever did.
And I think that she has enabled a culture at Lucasfilm that's become sort of petty and lackluster. I think she's hired a bunch of hacks and pretenders to surround her to work on the greatest film franchise of all time. And it shows. It's a lot of mismanagement, and it is way past her expiration date. Kathy Kennedy, I hope this is true, but if Kathy actually announced it, I would have no faith that it would actually happen, because she announces things that never happen. Kathy Kennedy will say, I'm stepping down at the end of the year. And the next thing you know, we're still talking about Kathy Kennedy 10 years from now. But that's really how I see her. I think that, and the worst of it all is the fact that she's played the victim card so many times. That really has turned me off. So, see you later, Kathy. It should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah, don't let the cantina door hit you on the way out. But I do think, and I think you would be hard pressed, those of you out there listening, I think this is one of the fairest takes that you're going to hear about Kathleen Kennedy. Of course, the punditry out there on YouTube are going to just absolutely savage her and not give her credit for anything. And then, of course, there will be the shills that'll say, oh, what a loss this is for Star Wars and Disney and oh my gosh, can anyone fill her shoes? I think this is a very even-handed, fair shake that she's getting. So there you go.
I felt like
Kennedy's
Lucasfilm has needed fresh blood for a long time. There are way too many people in the hallways of Lucasfilm who have been there way too long. And they've taken on this hubris that is fueled by the fact that they think they can do what George Lucas did just naturally. And if it doesn't work, they attack the fan base. So, I mean, enough is enough already. Let's get some grown-ups in there, and let's get some people who have some real vision and could provide a sense of continuity and consistency to the brand, which it's been sorely lacking for a decade.
Rebel Force Radio.
Star Wars.
I understand that maybe you were trying to make a difference, Kathleen, but you have to admit the last few movies you've shit out have been real stinkers.
All I ever wanted was to make great entertainment, believe me. But as soon as you start getting piles and piles of hate mail, endless messages calling you the C word, you can't think straight.
Well, I'm sorry I wrote all those letters. They probably was a bit much.
No, I got like 10,000 letters a day.
I was doing more like 12 to 13,000, especially after the new Indiana Jones came out.
All right. Well, there's Matt and Trey's take on all of this through the voice of Eric Cartman in South Park. What a great, I mean, what a, that if you read that whole Kathleen Kennedy arc that they did was really clever. And I got to say, as is, I think, always the case with South Park for the most part, somewhat fair. I think they handled it, I mean, with a lot of humor, but there was, it wasn't all just roasting Kathleen Kennedy. I think they really looked at it from a lot of different vantage points. So that's worth checking out. What's also worth checking out is this Andor Season 2 trailer. We've been waiting. We're going to get to it right now. We're going to do our shot-by-shot analysis. So, Jim, if you're ready, I will.
Let's do it.
I will prepare the video, and we will take a look at this together, and we will, we'll stop it and run it back and do all that stuff. So another reason why you got to be an all-access member of Rebel Force Radio on Patreon. Just don't do it through the app. Don't do it through the app. Through the website.
Exactly. They'll screw you 30%. Jeez.
Yeah, sorry. Here we go. All right, right away, we got to talk about the music. Sorry.
Yeah, it's blasting.
Yeah,
it's blasting in my
headphones.
There we
go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're potting it down. But we got to talk about the music right away. This has caused there's probably been more controversy caused by the soundtrack of this trailer than anything in the history of Andor, Rogue One at all. The 2004 song, The Revolution Starts Now, from Steve Earle, starts out with this raucous guitar riff, and it has this sort of Americana, not country, but this sort of Americana folk rock sort of vibe to it. And some people are saying, including in our own Jedi Council circle, that this has no place in Star Wars. This takes me out of it. This is not the tone, the vibe, the feel of Star Wars. And Jim is a big music buff and somebody who does love and appreciate rock music. Where do you stand on this? I'll tell you where I stand, but where do you stand on infusing this type of music into Star Wars?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, this is a commercial, and it's not necessarily representative of the actual show itself as far as the music they use in the soundtrack. I did see a lot of people getting extremely butthurt over this, and as a fan of Steve Earle, the great American singer-songwriter Steve Earle, I immediately recognized the tune. And I do agree it's a little out of place. But however, if you listen to the lyrics, the song is The Revolution Starts Now. It came out in 2004. Steve Earle. As a matter of fact, I'm friends with the guy who actually designed the album cover for the album The Revolution Starts Now, Tony Fitzpatrick. And I immediately sent him a message because I feel like it's my duty as the Star Wars guy to let him know that the Steve Earle song from the album in which he provided the cover art for is being featured in a Star Wars trailer. I feel pretty proud of that. But yeah, it's definitely a different vibe. One thing about trailer production that I've noticed in the last 10 or 12 years is that the music in the trailers is almost always garbage, because it's like, even the stuff they used in the sequel trilogy, it was all knockoff John Williams. It wasn't actual John Williams music. And people don't understand that. And then they lay all these sound effects over it, that these booms and swooshes and bams and stuff that's just there to catch your attention, like a commercial does. So you can't really use the production. And it's all coming from the same production house in LA, too, by the way. They do it all for all these movies. Their big thing for the longest time was the nostalgic toy piano sound that would, in a very minimalistic way, recreate the themes, the John Williams themes, or the famous themes to movies and shows that you know so well, just with single notes. Like with Star Wars, it would be like ping, 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 the sad piano. And I've hated that with a passion. God, have I hated that. Nothing gets me more bent out of shape than hearing that lame nostalgia piano recreating famous themes from films. They did it for Ghostbusters. They did it for Star Trek. They did it for Star Wars. They do it for everything, and it makes me want to puke. And it's all this canned garbage coming from a production company. This isn't John Williams music. This is a bastardization of that original soundtrack music, and they put it in just about every trailer that's been released over the last dozen years. And it makes me sick. Does the Steve Earle song generate that kind of angst with me? Hell no. I think it makes the Andor trailer kind of cool, actually. And I think it's okay. I think it's okay. But again, coming from the perspective of a guy who likes that music to begin with. So, look at the Thor trailer for that Thor Ragnarok. They used Led Zeppelin's The Immigrant Song, and people went crazy for it. It was perfect. But if you weren't a Zeppelin fan, would you get the sort of connection of the Norse imagery that gets in the Viking imagery that comes out of the lyrics of The Immigrant Song and make that connection with the Thor character? Or will you just be like, oh, this is the worst song I've ever heard, I hate it, which is how a lot of people are reacting on social media.
Right.
In response to the Steve Earle song being laid down in the Andor trailer, and all that shows me, it says nothing about your Star Wars fandom. It says everything about your ignorance about a great musician like Steve Earle. So get it together.
Well, but the Marvel films have definitely
bottom
done
line,
that.
I'm still ranting, Swank. I got to get this out.
All right.
I want to cover all my bases here. Even after all that, all the carrying on I just went through over the last 3 to 4 minutes, I still do believe it is very out of place for a Star Wars trailer to include a Steve Earle song. I think it's very out of place. But other than that, you know,
there are probably some business reasons here for this. Is the fact that you mentioned cool. You mentioned there was like a cool factor that this adds to it. And I think that that's what they want to lean into. I think that they want to lean into the character of Cassian Andor, and he's a rebel. And, you know, he is starting this revolution. Maybe if he's not the start, but it's starting for him, and things are about to really heat up. I remember, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, I know, because Coldplay is a punchline for a lot of people these days. There was a time when everybody loved Coldplay. But
not everyone.
All right, not everybody, but they were more popular than they are right now. My point is that there was a time when the Star Wars, at the time, the complete saga, episodes 1 through 6, was going to be shown on cable television. I believe it was TNT that got the rights to it at that point. It was going to be the first time that the prequels and the original trilogy were going to be shown as part of a weekend-long festival marathon, and they took highlights of a lot of the scenes from all 6 films, and they put it to Fix You, Coldplay's Fix You. And there was, because I had an emotional connection to that song, I also had an emotional connection to, why are you laughing?
Well, no, when you say, you had an emotional connection to the Coldplay, I mean, it just conjured up this mental image of you sitting there like like a dark room. It's only lit by the single light bulb that's just like it's hanging down
it's
from the
swinging.
wire from the ceiling. Yeah. And you're just sitting there, you're in a folding chair, and there's a boombox in front of you, and you're listening to Coldplay, and like there's a single tear rolling down your cheek. But you're still smoking a cigar like you don't give a crap.
Right, of course.
That's the mental image I get. That's the mental image I get.
So
I haven't even talked about what you're wearing in this mental image, but
I can't only imagine.
I'll draw you a picture after
Okay, he said that over after the show. But they took these scenes from all 6 films and did this really nice compilation, and they put it to Coldplay's Fix You. Wasn't everybody's cup of tea. I loved it. Again, because I had a connection to the song, and I had a connection to obviously to the clips from the film. It combined to create something that I thought had a lot of impact. And of course, TNT was trying to repackage what at the time was still a bit of a controversial collection of films, the prequel trilogy, and make them hip, make them cool, repackage them, rebrand them. And so they did it with this Coldplay song. I loved it. So that's what this reminded me of. And it's not like Steve Earle is to 2025 what Coldplay was to, that
I mean,
period of time. But
it's kind of an obscure track. I mean, it was the title track to Earl's 2004 album, but it's not
the spirit of the song. It's the style of the song that creates the emotional connection. And so if you connect to the characters and you connect to the vibe of the tune, the two a la, mashup, it's going to work together. So I'm with you in the sense that, is it out of place? Yes, but it's a commercial. You nailed it when you said it was a commercial. You stop short at it's not a commercial for a film. It's a commercial for a TV show. It's not a John Williams joint. And no, I don't want it running through as the score for the show itself, but I think it does make the trailer kind of cool. So I'm going to give it a pass, since we're doing pass fail with Kathleen Kennedy. It's fine for me. It's fine for me. Doesn't hurt it. I understand that there's purists out there that feel that this stuff is sacred, but I got to tell you guys, the door is closed long ago on Star Wars being some sort of sacred cow. It no longer is. It no longer is. And I think
people are bending over backwards to recreate the trailer with more appropriate music. I've seen 3 or 4 different re-edits of the trailer with what they consider to be more appropriate music. And I mean, I'm just fine with it. I'm more or less concerned with the visuals that are being presented. But I mean, also keep in mind, Skeleton Crew was released with a trailer that had Peter Schilling's Major Tom as it was even the original. It was like some weird like Huttese parody of it.
And nobody seemed to care.
And nobody seemed to care. But man, are people getting bent out of shape about good old Steve Earle, an American legend being represented here on this soundtrack for a commercial trailer TV streaming series. But so I'm just saying, hey guys, don't get so bent out of shape. Do whatever, get your rocks off. But I mean, this is to immediately start like crapping all over the music of Steve Earle because it doesn't mix with Star Wars the way you want it to, is kind of it's all subjective, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. All right, well, let's get into it. We got the music at an appropriate level, I think, here now. So let's hit it again. We've talked about the music, so this is all about what we're seeing with these characters for season 2. So
Cassian walking down a hallway.
Cassian walking down a hallway.
And he's in that same area where we see this, I guess there's some sort of protest going on, and the Imperial stormtroopers come in. They shut it all down. They open fire on the crowds. I mean, this is something that we've seen happen time and time again in history, where military gets brought in to curb public uprising in the form of protests and things like that, you know, in places like China and Russia. Where
Kent State University right here in Ohio.
Oh my God. Yeah, a friend of mine was there that day. And he was walking there and everyone was running the other way. He's like, where are you guys going? He's like, they're like, you better run with us. So
Jim, some are saying that this is the Gorman massacre that they're going to show.
Well, that's what some are saying.
Yeah. Which is an EU event.
It really is. If I remember correctly, it was an uprising. This Gorman massacre was an uprising in which Tarkin really earned his stripes because I guess he was in a Star Destroyer in orbit of the planet, and as this uprising was happening, according to the expanded universe, Tarkin landed the Star Destroyer on the protesters. He just put it down to the surface and crushed people,
like Tiananmen Square style. Just boom,
just brought it all down and crushed them all.
Wow. Okay,
that's how I recall it being told in the old EU was that. Yeah.
Do you think that this what we're going to see this massacre in the public square, is this on Chandrilla? Are we looking at Chandrilla at this point?
Is that the planet? Well, the planet Gorman is the planet where
in the EU. But
yes.
I'm wondering if this takes place on Mon Mothma's homeworld of Chandrilla.
Well, I mean, possibly if they wanted to reshape it and make Gorman a city or something, but they do have to follow established canon for this because Mon Mothma actually makes reference to the Gorman massacre in Star Wars Rebels.
That's right.
So they do have to apply a certain level of canon, but they could, say, well, yeah, she mentioned Gorman massacre, but like the city of Gorman on the planet Chandrilla. But I don't know if that's really necessary to go that far to try to make something fit in the canon,
Because this opening shot I thought looked like Chandrilla.
What does Chandrilla look like? Because that's a planet we've never actually seen in live action before. So, but apparently you've been there. So tell us all about
Mon Mothma's homeworld.
Yeah. I
don't
think
see it later. We see it later in the trailer, and so there's.
We do.
Yeah.
Is that when they're all dancing around?
Yeah, they're having one of these like fancy parties. That.
Yeah.
All right, we're only 1 second in. Let's say.
Yeah, we got to really start moving here. But we do see stormtroopers in action here, and it looks like they're opening fire on regular citizens.
This is more stormtroopers than we ever saw in season 1 of Andor.
True,
that's for sure.
Yeah. It definitely has a huge Star Wars vibe to it with those white armored soldiers. Now we see Andor walking through another hallway. It looks like on board a starship, maybe, or in the hallways of. I think a lot of the action in season 2 might take place on Coruscant. So maybe he's in some place he's not supposed to be, like an Imperial facility. And then we see him walking down yet another hallway, and this looks like it's on board maybe a star freighter or something, maybe Luthen ship.
A lot of Cassian walking we see him from the back in this trailer so far.
Yeah. So he's going places. And we're following him.
Now,
there he is on
not
Yavin.
Cassian here. This is definitely a female that's taking a shot at an Imperial officer right here.
She looks like she has kind of fair hair, like sort of gray even.
This could be Mon Mothma's sister.
Oh, really?
Name just flew out of my
I was
head.
thinking that assistant that Luthen Rail had.
Oh, right.
It could be her, but she had darker hair than that. Her hair looks very light. But she's walking down some hallway.
Definitely
maybe
seems like some blonde hair.
Yeah. So maybe she's on it. Maybe that's Deidre. Maybe she has longer hair in this because she was blonde, obviously. Deidre Mira. And so she's in a hallway. There's Cassian on.
This is
Yavin
Cassian
at the
hanging
Yavin
out at
base.
Galaxy's Edge, by the way, right here. He,
There he is at Galaxy's Edge.
This is the Yavin.
Yeah, he's waiting to get into the cantina. The app says he only has half an hour left, so he's going to go grab some blue milk to kill the time.
Already looking
obvious
like
rebels.
the Cassian of Rogue One. You know, this is
A lot of swagger. Lot of swagger here. And you see in the background X-Wing starfighters, one of the Yavin temples. You see X-Wing pilots. You see random, who's that? Is that Bix? Who is that back there?
I don't know about that. I was zooming in on the X-Wings themselves that are taken off.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you see the towers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the temples. And so there's, and Cassian just walking through the middle of it all like he owns the place. A lot of swagger, like I said.
Yeah, who's he talking to here? I saw some online thinking that this is him talking to Cyril Karn. Based on the back, but I don't know. Why would these two? I mean, obviously Cyril is on the trail. He's looking for, he's the Javert to Cassian's Jean Valjean here. This is the Marshal.
What are you making a reference to? Jean-Pierre, John Jay.
Oh, Les Mis. There's Javert and Valjean.
Oh, of course, Les Mis. Of course. Not everyone in the listening audience, nor your co-host, is that theater savvy. Never sat through Les Mis.
Let's look at I'll do another reference here. This is the Marshal and what was the fugitives that Richard Kimball. This is the Richard Kimball and the Marshal.
Tommy
squaring
Lee Jones.
off. Tommy Lee Jones. Okay. Yeah. So, but I don't know if they're gonna. I like to think that they'll meet up and kind of have a face off. I think that would be kind of cool, but not sure if it's him. Speculation that it's him. What's going on with this cornfield here?
Well, I'll tell you, it doesn't look like a cornfield. It looks more like a wheat field of some sort.
Field. All right.
And you see a very Star Wars type structure behind them, like maybe a hangar bay of some sort and some weird mountains in the background. Now, something I've always known from the expanded universe is that when Princess Leia tells Tarkin, when he's demanding to know where the rebel base is, she says they're on Dantooine. Dantooine was always said to be a planet that was dominated by fields, like grain fields. The entire planet covered by these tall grass or grain fields. And there are serpents that actually swim through the growth on the planet among these fields of wheat or grain or whatever they are. So this could be the planet Dantooine. That's what I'm thinking.
Because in Star Wars, it's established, in A New Hope, that it's established that there were remnants of an Imperial base or of a rebel base there. So that would be great if you saw that and then saw them leave and then they end up on Yavin. Very cool.
But you see stormtroopers here, which indicate that the Empire is on to the fact already that they have a base on Dantooine. So that information that Leia gives Tarkin would be, which Dantooine, they're on Dantooine.
It's old news.
Yeah, we know.
Right,
We know.
we were just there.
A few years ago, A few years ago, we chased Cassian Andor and his gang away from there. Why don't you give us something we can use? But there could be a twist in the story here that maybe just some random Imperial troops discover a rebel base there and they get wiped out before they can report it back to the Empire.
Yeah. Like the biker scouts on Endor.
Exactly.
All right.
Who you want to win?
All right. Now, Cassian in the cockpit of that, the TIE fighter, the TIE Avenger, that's got everybody excited. That's what I think we're seeing here. And Jim, you just mentioned, did you not just mention the TIE fighter game?
Well, I did when I was talking about J.D. Dillard's abandoned Star Wars story that some people said would feature, the Sith, and it was loosely based on the TIE Fighter PC game, I believe is what it said. Yeah.
And the TIE Avenger made its debut in that game.
Oh, aha! Well, maybe J.D. Dillard will receive a credit or two when we get to the end of the episode.
He's finally going to get his Star Wars credit here.
Maybe. Who knows?
All right. Oh, so we're still on that planet with the wheat fields. And here's Cassian coming in and taking out some sort of transport. It looks sort of like a train.
It's like the Imperial tank that actually gets introduced. It's on like 6 wheels or 8 wheels.
Mm-hmm.
And that got introduced way back in, the Revenge of the Sith. That transport, I forget what they call it, but it's rare to actually see a vehicle with wheels in Star Wars, because we know that they're largely a repulsor lift technology society. But here we see this cool tank transport. Whatever. We also see it in Rogue One. Remember, they're transporting Jyn Erso to the prison in one of those tanks when she gets rescued.
That's right. Yes.
And it's a vehicle design that was eventually then adopted by the Empire. It's called the SPHA, Self-Propelled Heavy Artillery. Or no, that's not what it's called. It's called the Juggernaut. That's what it's called. The Juggernaut. And the Juggernaut, famous by its appearance in the Clone Wars, 10 wheels, according to this description I'm looking at.
All right. The Juggernaut.
Yeah.
Okay.
Juggernaut, baby. And you see, could be on Dantooine once again with the wheat fields, and Cassian's taking it out.
Well, I want to stop here, because this is really, we talked about what they're leaning into and wanting to make this appeal to perhaps a new audience using the Steve Earle song. But boy, are they playing up the critic angle throughout the rest of this trailer. They have lots of blurbs from various critics. And this title card, the first season of Andor was hailed by critics everywhere. They can't talk about numbers. They can't talk about eyeballs, but they can definitely talk about the critics. It's a smart play. I think it's a really smart play. And as these title cards come across, you'll see that they're really appealing, I think, to a non-traditional Star Wars audience here. They're appealing to an audience that wants really quality drama and great storytelling.
Well, you mentioned the Steve Earle inclusion, as a way to kind of draw audiences, but it's not because of the song itself, but the energy the song provides through the imagery.
Yes.
And it just feels like, hey, this rocks. So the show is going to rock. And look, we're going to throw up these little blurbs on the screen that tells you that other people thought the first season rocked. So check it out. The first season of Andor was hailed by critics everywhere. It should say like ... and then another thing should pop up. Even some Star Wars fans actually liked it. Because we're the harshest critics in the galaxy.
Even Star Wars fans like this Star Wars series. So true. All right. Oh, look who's back. Oh, yes. Saw
Hello.
Looking characteristically serious as he always does.
But let's note that there's some things attributed to Saw that we didn't see in the first season. In the first season, we saw Gerrera prior to having to wear the cyborg armor that apparently keeps him alive with the breath mask and everything. So
This is Rogue One Saw, man. This is Rogue One.
Yeah, this is much closer to the Rogue One Saw, and we did not see Saw like that in season 1. That was not the Saw we saw. We saw a Saw that was prior to the Saw we saw in Rogue One. But what I'm saying is that he has to wear these cybernetic enhancements. What are they? Augmented armor. Partially a mod, maybe. I don't know, to use more current Star Wars terminology, but he does have that breath mask, which indicates to me that he's been dealt with the life-threatening injuries that he requires to be suited up like, and he might even have that metal leg and everything at this point. So I'm hoping that there's going to be some sort of acknowledgement to Saw's life-threatening injuries, and maybe we'll actually see Saw acquire those life-threatening injuries. That's what I think that Andor needs to do. I think Andor needs to give us that story about how Saw ended up to be all beat up and injured.
So Saw has hair here. We see we see a bald Saw at one point in Rogue One.
Only briefly.
It's
when he rescues Jyn.
Right. So somewhere between here and Rogue One, so he has hair, then he's going to shave his head, go rescue Jyn Erso, and then, or do we think he's rescued Jyn Erso by now?
I think this is already Rogue One, or I'm sorry, the events of Andor, season 2, will take place long after he had rescued
Jyn. Okay.
And maybe Jyn is part of his crew still at this time. So we might actually see her being represented in some way, shape, or form, a younger version of Jyn.
Right.
But she should still be part of his crew at this point in time.
So Bald Saw is prior to this. That's when he rescues Jyn. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, yes.
It's even throwing me off.
But, in season 1 of Andor, Saw, it wasn't obvious that he had this armor that was sustaining him with the breath mask and all that. I don't think we ever see that. We don't see Bald Saw in Andor season 1.
We don't.
But we see that there's one sequence with him and Luthen, and they're having a conversation in some cave somewhere, some hideout for Saw Gerrera and his crew. And it appears that conversation is taking place prior to Saw having those injuries.
Yes, definitely.
I'm hoping, I want to see that happen. I want to see whatever conflict or accident that he was involved in. Legend says it was a showdown with Darth Vader that made Saw dependent on technology to keep him alive and needed cybernetic augmentations, whatever.
Yeah, and those hits off that oxygen that he takes. We think it's oxygen. We don't know really what's being flown through those tubes.
Whatever it is, it does murder to one's vocal cords.
Forrest Whitaker, though, nails it as this character every time. So I'm looking forward to seeing Saw again. Love the grit. No one's more grizzled in Star Wars than Saw Gerrera. We thought that it was going to be a showdown between Klieg and Owen Lars in the whole grizzled contest, but no one's got Saw beat when it comes to being grizzled.
He'd be running laps around those two guys if he didn't have a fake leg.
All right, let's get back to the trailer here. All right, so the rap calls it emotional, thrilling, and exciting. Here's Mon looking mighty fine, I gotta say. This is some big whoop-de-doo. Jim Summer speculating, could this be the wedding? Could this be the wedding of, we saw Mon looking like she was going to take the offer from the gangster and put her daughter with his son, therefore sort of legitimizing the son, taking the stench off of him being the son of a gangster, and then also fulfilling the Chandrillan tradition of betrothing the Utes.
Yeah. And remember, Mon is married to that sad sack of a guy who, basically is just, he's sucking off the teat of her, not royalty, but her prestige,
her inheritance, her wealth, her
riches,
family wealth,
her riches, all that stuff. And he's just living up the life, gambling, drinking, hanging out with his buddies and stuff. But he and Mon have a very fractured relationship, and they're basically just keeping up appearances. So she doesn't get affected politically by a divorce, and he still gets to live off the riches of the land by basically just, it was another one of those arranged marriages. And this arranged marriage has really run out of steam. They talk a little bit about it in the new novel, Realm of Fear, that just came out this week. I've been reading it. I got a preview copy from Random House, and they at one point reference the relationship that she has with Perrin, her husband. Yeah. And I want so much more of that out of the book, but I'm about midway through the book right now, and I'd be farther in the book if it wasn't meandering as much as it is. Like Star Wars novels. Star Wars novels tend to do. Now, this is the first part of a trilogy, so I'm strapping in, but halfway through the book, Realm of Fear, Mask of Fear, whatever they call it, there's not a story there. I've yet to come across a story, and too much time is being spent with these background characters named Chemish and Hockey, and I'm sick of hearing their names because they don't do anything. Chapter after chapter, they don't do jack crap. So I'm hoping the book is going to kick in the second half. I have been recommending it because I really did enjoy the dives into the heads of Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, Perrin, etc. But now it's just gotten to the middle part of the book where I'm not really sure if there's a story being told. I just feel like I'm going through the paces with these characters right now. Something has to happen. We need some action. So, but I'm sticking with it. It's a slow burn, though. It's a slow burn.
All right. So here we got Mon looking fine here at some big shindig. Could be the wedding of her daughter. Another little press quote here. The Atlantic calling it confident and sophisticated. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Those are terms we don't normally see applied to any production emerging from the Disney era of Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Confident and sophisticated. But I think it's that those are fair terms to be applied to Andor based on what we saw from season 1 and from what we know of Tony Gilroy.
All right, here's Luthen. I don't know if he's having a little steam. What's going on? Maybe he's working on the wrinkles, but he's certainly in the guise of, this is an older looking Luthen, and he's got the sort of that foppish look of the antique dealer, the shopkeeper, whatever you want to call him. Yeah.
Now, I'm just curious to see how we're going to see these characters advance. We know that every 3 episodes of Andor season 2 is going to represent a year, 1 year leading us closer to the events of Rogue One. And each 3-episode chunk is going to be presented to us weekly. So instead of making this a weekly series that's going to take us through the middle of July, Andor season 2 is going to come and go in a matter of 1 month. By late May, we will be done with this series because they're going to drop 3 episodes a week on us. So that's going to be the essence of getting a feature lead film every week for 4 straight weeks in April and May.
See, this feels like a purge to me. This feels like Disney's just trying to like get it out, get it done, and move onwards. I mean, could this be related at all to Kathleen Kennedy's exit? Are they trying to just get the Kathleen Kennedy era over and done with and get get this show out there and move on?
That could be. That very well could be. They're trying to clean house and have a fresh slate for whoever is going to be the new head honcho at Lucasfilm. One thing we haven't mentioned, though, is what if Lucasfilm really gets absorbed by the Disney company and there's not really a head of Lucasfilm anymore and everything ceases to become a Lucasfilm production and becomes a Disney production? Crazier things have happened. They're paying George Lucas a lot of money to use the facilities at the Presidio Park in San Francisco, where Lucasfilm headquarters is located, plus to use his facilities at Skywalker Ranch. They pay George millions a year in rent. He might not own Star Wars anymore, but he's definitely still the landlord of Star Wars. So you might think at some point they'll be like, hey, let's bring this all under our roof and move the whole thing down to Southern California. You never know. I mean, crazier things have happened. And I don't see what the benefit is of leaving it all the operations up in San Francisco anymore. I really don't understand why that's so precious. I mean, they can make movies in Southern California. This I know. George took the whole operation up to the Bay Area to get away from Hollywood. Wouldn't that be just like the biggest salt in his wound to move the Star Wars operation down to Hollywood? But it could happen. I'm saying it could happen. So, but that has nothing to do with Andor season 2. People are saying it's
phenomenal storytelling. The Verge,
phenomenal. Well, I can't resist it now. Now that I know it's truly phenomenal storytelling, I count me in.
Bix, I think that's Bix Colleen there, looking fantastic, emerging quickly as one of my favorite Star Wars characters. I think it's Bix.
Well, it's hard to tell because she's wearing. I can't tell if that's Bix or if it's that other one.
Maybe it's not Bix. I thought it was
because
Bix.
she looks like that assistant of Luthen's.
No, that's not the Luthen assistant.
No, that's not the Luthen assistant.
No,
I can't tell. It's just to me, I'm not sure about that. I'm
Cinta.
sorry.
That's definitely not Cinta.
Cinta, yeah, that's her name.
Yeah. So this might be a new character, but I feel like it might be Bix. I don't know. Anyway,
hard to tell with the hood over her.
Yeah,
it's sort of hard.
There
to
she
tell.
is walking next to Cassian. Another hallway.
I think you know what that might. I think that is Bix actually.
Hey, look who it is, Orson Krennic. This is a return of a character that a lot of fans are looking forward to. Ben Mendelsohn is Orson Krennic, and this definitely creates more connective tissue between the Andor series and Rogue One by having him figure in there. He's an interesting, even though we know his fate, he's still a very interesting character, very ambitious guy, and sort of represents that opportunistic side of the Imperials.
Well, I hope that they respect the authenticity of the character and the integrity by including the famous Orson Krennic lisp. Remember that lisp of Ben Mendelsohn's?
Yes.
I delivered the weapon the Emperor requested. I deserve an audience to make certain he understands its remarkable potential. Remember that line?
I sure did. So Ben Mendelsohn back as Orson Krennic, looking out a window and looking very self-satisfied, Jim. He looks like he's very happy with himself here.
Well, I think
I think he's a big fan of Orson. Orson Krennic is a big fan of Orson Krennic, I believe.
He's Orson Krennic's biggest fan. He's president of the Orson Krennic fan club. When the battle station is finished, Governor Tarkin, the Senate will be of little concern.
That's a great Daffy Duck.
On.
It's a great Daffy Duck. He does have a Daffy Duck kind of thing going on.
Suffrage. You're
well,
dying.
That's Sylvester. That's Sylvester. All right.
It doesn't matter. It's
even Mel
Looney
Blanc,
Tunes.
the man of 1,000 voices, had to be a little derivative on himself.
Okay,
Sylvester
all
and
right,
Daffy
all
Duck.
right.
Very close.
So Krennic,
very close.
Krennic is back.
Oh, now, as far as cameos go, you don't get bigger than the literal Death Star. That's about the biggest cameo you can have when it comes to Star Wars. Krennic looking at his creation. All that's missing is the big, what's it called? What's that?
Laser dish.
The laser dish. Yeah. The dent in the olive. Yeah, the eye of the Death Star.
Yeah, the pimento in the olive hole. It's without the dish in the shot.
I think in Rogue One we actually see the dish coming, being applied. So this would make sense. We haven't seen it yet, so it's eyeless.
Right. No pimento.
Okay, now
Back
check
to
this out.
Yavin.
We see a dead body here on Yavin, and I don't know if this is a rebel pilot or who's laying here, but everybody else is just hightailing it out of there. Well, I shouldn't say hightailing it. They're kind of slow-tailing it as these X-Wings take off. We also see Rolling Stone's blurb saying a prestige drama with searing action and Emmy-worthy performances. Not Emmy-winning, Emmy-worthy, because we didn't get any Emmys out of Andor. I think we probably should have. I think Diego Luna really was deserving. I also think Stellan Skarsgård was worthy of an Emmy. But Emmy-worthy performances.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I don't think the trophies have extended to Andor the way they should. But I have an observation I want to make.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at through a hangar doorway, looking out of a Yavin temple out to the landing field where we see 3 ships taking off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the X-Wing on the left that really makes me wonder, because if you look at the coloring, it has black around the body of the ship, black at the nose of the ship. It looks exactly like an X-Wing that was parked outside of Saw Gerrera's hideout on Jeddah in Rogue One. If you recall,
this is
there were
Saw's
X-Wings
gang,
parked out there.
maybe.
So I think this is Saw's gang exiting Yavin and leaving a body behind. And that body could very well be someone associated with the rebellion, because we know that there was a very thick line between Saw Gerrera and the organized rebellion by the time of Rogue One, because Saw was such an extremist. And so what's going on here? What are they escaping from? Why they're leaving the Yavin base with a body left there on the hangar floor?
Yeah, is that Matt Lanter? No, it's not Matt. Okay, good. Just making sure that wasn't Matt Lanter being thrown to the wolves again, like he was.
Well, yeah. How many times can one rebel get killed? He was killed off in the Mandalorian.
Right. Okay. Just making sure that wasn't Matt. All right.
Well, yeah, that's one of Saw Gerrera's X-Wings.
Aha. Good observation there.
Yeah, I noticed that immediately. And then the other X-Wing I can't quite make out, but we see an explosion. I think that's back to that Gorman massacre.
Yep.
What we're calling that, those people in the courtyard who get shot.
And now we
upon.
see this female character really kind of getting upset with Cassie, and she looks new. I don't remember her. I don't think this is.
I think that's Bix.
No, it's not.
That's not Bix.
No, I would recognize Bix anywhere. A big fan of the Bix. No, this is not Bix. This is what looks more like Shmi Skywalker than it does Bix.
It does. Well, I mean, that's just because of the harshness of the way the hair is styled and everything. And she does.
That's not Bix.
She does look a little bit older than Bix was presented. But we have to keep in mind that there's big time jumps going on here.
Right.
From episode to episode, each 3-episode arc. So this could be something from one of the latter arcs showing an older Bix. I can't tell. And Cassian being held back by stormtroopers and more.
No,
more
that's not
troopers.
Cassian. That's
that's not.
That's
what's
that
his guy.
Name? That guy.
That guy from Ferrix, who was featured in. He had. Remember that scene where they were all walking up to the wall and Ferrix and grabbing their gloves. He's that guy, isn't it?
Is it Brasso?
Yeah, Brasso.
It's Brasso.
That's
Okay, there we go. Brasso's back.
Yeah. Yes.
And he's on
he's
the wheat
being
planet.
restrained. He's being restrained by stormtroopers. It looks like he might be on the planet we think is Dantooine. So perhaps Brasso is signed up for the official rebellion.
Looks like it. All right. This spring. All right, we got some trooper armor here, but helmetless troopers. What's going on here with these guys? These are definitely Imperials. Well, I shouldn't say they're definitely Imperials. We got a guy with an Imperial officer's cap, but wearing the armor of a stormtrooper or some sort of armored trooper. So I don't know if I don't recognize any of these guys. Do you?
No, these could be rebels infiltrating an Imperial outpost or something, doing the classic stormtrooper disguise.
Yes.
That's what I get those vibes.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. It's odd to see someone wearing an Imperial officer's cap, but also wearing stormtrooper armor, helmetless. Yeah, that's a different look. So we'll have to wait and see what this is all about.
Here we got Deidre Marrow looking very concerned as she's, I think she's in the in one of those offices that we see her.
Yeah,
she
like the
really...
ICB, the ISB. That's what they're called.
ISB, right? Yeah.
Imperial Security.
Oh, and here I love this. This is a really it's very quick, but it's a little raise of the eyebrow of Orson Krennic. If you look around here, I'm thinking is that Perrin in the background?
It could be like or someone from his circle wearing that kind of Coruscant elite wardrobe. Gold and blue with all the piping and
but it looks to me like maybe he's talking to Mon Mothma here.
Oh yeah, definitely a female. Could be Mon. Maybe he's shown up at one of Mon's little clandestine get-togethers with other rabble rousers and
one of her little dinner parties.
Yeah, and Krennic has showed up to pee in the pool. We'll see how this goes. But he does have a very confident, arching of the eyebrows, like I'm on to you. Mm-hmm.
The critically acclaimed series. Oh, check it. Now, Cassian's having a lot of fun here in this advanced TIE, this variant TIE fighter, the TIE Avenger.
Looks like he's opening fire on people who are providing resistance, like stormtroopers in a hangar. So this is before he's even taken off. Then back to that wild party of Mon Mothmas where people are dancing and celebrating. Everyone's going crazy. Kind of reminds me of that celebration they had on in The Rise of Skywalker when they went to the planet Pasan. It was at Abu Dhabi sand planets. I think it was called
right, where they're doing the big festival, right? And
yeah, Pisan. And it seemed like they had very similar dance moves to what we see going on here in Endor. And then here's like another dinner party with a weird floating mechanical device, which to me looks like a photography droid of some sort. Like maybe those are cameras with the lights, and it's like just floating around the party taking pictures, or maybe it's something
you don't have
way
to pay
more
the photographer.
Right, right.
Been married, you know what those photographers cost.
Right. So you just get a droid to take pictures of it all, as like a drone or something, or it could be something way more nefarious.
Hey, K2SO.
First time we're seeing K2SO. So we'll see the origin of K2 and Andor finding each other, which was assumed we would see in season 1, but they sat on it for season 2.
Oh, that's a cool shot of the back of the stormtroopers running through the hallway.
Very Imperial type hallway, maybe on board a starship or something.
Very cool.
Classic Star Wars design.
Oh, I think we got that. Is this Bix? There's Bix. Oh, yeah.
Cassian hugging again, appearing on that wheat field planet that could be Dantooine. So we see here maybe Cassian has to rescue her or something. We see
some riot gear going on. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those are Imperials, as we see, wearing similar armor to what we saw the Mud Troopers wearing in the Solo film. And then it appears there's an uprising happening behind them. Citizens raising their fist, fighting the power.
Ooh, look at this vehicle.
Tank.
Whoop.
Look like the Star Wars tank.
Yeah.
Kind of crashing, kind of like the repulsor lifts on the tank are failing and it's kind of smacking down on the surface. And then we see Cyril Karn making his first appearance, looking for a bowl of cereal. It looks like he just went through a metal detector. Melshi, we got Melshi.
Oh boy, all the Melshi fans.
Melshi.
Move over, Cult of Wedge. Fans. Now it's the Cult of Melshi.
Yeah. Both of you are very excited by this shot. Melchi.
Oh, who was this? Was it? Oh, okay. I don't know who this is.
Yeah, that looks like some sort of just regular citizen, maybe a dignitary of some sort who has pulled out a blaster and is threatening a group of people. Yeah. People are reacting in shock and fear of this maniac with a blaster.
There's the TIE Avenger again.
Cool shot. Again, still, it's in that Imperial facility that we saw those stormtroopers running through. So it must take off from the docking bay and go through a hallway as it's flying overhead and the stormtroopers are unleashing fire on it. We know Cassian is piloting that sucker. That could be interesting. More Cassian, more explosions, more flips over a table. Bix getting pulled back by her hair, it appears.
How dare they? How dare they touch Bix like that?
That's an Imperial officer taking her hostage or holding her at gunpoint, pulling her by her hair.
I don't like that.
So
treat her with respect.
Yeah, we don't like this guy.
Oh, it's Cyril's mom.
So we know we'll be getting more of her. And yeah, she looks like she's just, church ladying it up. She's like the church lady of Star Wars, Cyril's mom. But there she is, yucking it up. Some random character yelling as holding a blaster as all kind of explosions happen around him. Then Saw Gerrera yelling at someone to, it's a pep talk. Saw is giving here about staying in the fight and all of that. And, it's just like this guy.
Are you ready to fight? He says.
Andor, a star. Have you noticed? Go back to the title card. I'm very disappointed that they've leaned on that lame tagline. Andor, a Star Wars story.
Oh no, God. It's back.
It's back. Andor, a Star Wars story.
Wow, I did not see this on my my first 10 viewings of this
Yeah.
trailer. But Jim,
Yeah.
for those that don't remember, this was the branding. This was the moniker of the standalone stories that were going to happen outside of the Roman numerical chapters of the Star Wars saga. A Star Wars story, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And that was abandoned. And here it is again. Wow, this is...
I mean, what's wrong with Star Wars, Andor? I mean, to me, that works the best. It's calling something as Andor, a Star Wars story. It's just so lightweight and feather dustery. I don't know what
the A looks sitting there on top of the S in Star Wars for a Star Wars story. This is terrible.
To me, this is Kathleen Kennedy's legacy right here in print. Andor, a Star Wars story. Come on. It's too cutesy. It's too cutesy. A Star Wars story. Please hold my hand after showing me a trailer filled with stormtroopers and TIE fighters and blasters and rebels and Imperials. And,
sure.
Oh,
and
hold my hand and let me know. Andor, a Star Wars story for the people in the back row. It's Andor, a Star Wars story.
Right. After I've been able to navigate 3 seasons of The Mandalorian, a season of Kenobi, a season of Boba Fett, a season of The Acolyte, a season of Ahsoka. Come on.
It's just more of the crappy marketing that's really been a hallmark of the last 5 years of Star Wars. Disconnect with the brand, disconnect with the audience, dumbing it down. The classic dumbing down of Star Wars, which George Lucas is spinning in his grave right now.
George is still alive, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for correcting that. That's why I pause. I pause for the correction. It's not like I didn't know. I only said it for effect.
Now Cassian here, at this little wink that he does, he looks like he's all gussied up. I think he is at this big whoop-de-doo that's happening on perhaps Chandrilla. Maybe this is the wedding of Mon Mothma and Perrin's kid. So I think he's sort of being, undercover here and dressed up as a mover and a shaker. He's got his hair all primped.
Well, it's odd that they reveal this image on the same week I noticed an ad for Star Wars pomade. I mean, I'm not kidding. I saw an ad for Star Wars pomade.
I might be in the market for this.
That's the greasy kid stuff you put in your hair to, they called it before they called it mousse or sculpting gel or whatever they call it now. They called it pomade. I think that's a brand name. And there is now a line of Star Wars pomade. So now you know what to get the kiddies for their Easter baskets. Yeah. What kid isn't going to be thrilled, getting the Easter basket on, Easter morning and finding Star Wars pomade there?
That's a big marketing. I have 2 very, very, very memorable Star Wars Easter gifts. Number 1, pulled out all of the eggs, all of the chocolate. All that was left was grass. And it wasn't what I really wanted from the Easter bunny until I pulled out the grass itself, and laying at the bottom of the basket was Han Solo in Bespin fatigues. That's Easter memory number 1. Easter memory number 2, very much like Ralphie wanting that Red Ryder BB gun, got done opening up the Easter basket, eating some chocolate, some eggs. Did you have a nice Easter? Yeah, it was pretty good. Did you get everything you wanted? Almost. Why don't you go look behind the couch? Green lightsaber. That's right. Green lightsaber during the run up to Return of the Jedi. Very excited. Had it behind the couch from the Easter bunny. Okay.
I never got gifts on Easter. I always just got candy. Here's a Cadbury egg, kid. Just get out of my way.
I always got one gift. Like one gift, candy, and then one, sort of token gift. But Star Wars action figure just made for the Easter basket, I think.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that. but it never happened in my house.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Here's your Reese's Pieces, loser. All right.
Season 2, Andor. April 22nd, Disney Plus. There we go. We got through it. We
got through it. Oh my God, is this a long show? We're gonna skip the Seth Green stuff. Something I really wanted to talk about was we'll get to it next week.
I
really wanted to talk about next week.
All right, we'll do it all next week. So don't forget
Is that okay?
I think that's great. Let's do it next week.
All right.
Rebel Force Radio. Don't forget to join us next week. There was just so much to talk about.
So we spent it talking about Terry Nunn. Hey, you know, this is how it goes.
Yeah, this is why you tune into Rebel Force Radio each and every week. Wow, what a great show. What a great time. It is definitely an interesting time to be a Star Wars fan with Kathleen Kennedy's imminent departure. We've got, as Max said, this accelerated release schedule for Andor, 12 episodes over 4 weeks, 3 episodes a week. What does that mean for the Rebel Force Radio after show? Well, it means they're going to be long shows. That's what I can tell you.
Yeah. I guess this episode's kind of a warm-up for that. I mean, 3-hour shows, expect them. But we have to do what we have to do, you know.
We got to do it. Who else is going to do it if we don't? No one's going to do it. Not the way we do it. So look forward to that. That's going to be very interesting. So make sure that you're tuning in and subscribing to Rebel Force Radio on YouTube, because you'll get notified when we're going live. And those after shows, they're going to be a lot of fun. A lot of meat on the bone. I mean, 3 episodes a week.
Yeah. It's going to be amazing.
Are they Tuesday releases? Do we have the actual
Tuesday releases?
Okay.
I noticed with Andor Season 1, the shortest episode was 37 minutes long. The longest episode was 56 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd say the average overall was about a 45-minute episode average per each week of Season 1. So that's why I'm anticipating anywhere from 2 hours and 15 minutes to 2.5 hours of new Andor content per week.
That's a lot. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a great test of our mettle here on Rebel Force Radio. But we are up for the challenge. We've had years of practice, so we'll be fine. Okay. So in addition to the YouTube, check us out over on Patreon. We talked about Patreon. Not only are you able to get full show video of the podcast you're listening to right now, but you can also get exclusive podcasts you can't find anywhere else. Just don't subscribe or don't become a Patreon through the iOS app, either on your iPhone or your iPad.
iOS. Yes. Avoid it like the plague.
Avoid it. Just go through the browser. Safari is your friend. You Android users, you're fine. Just go ahead and do what you do.
You'll save 30% if you go through the iOS app.
I don't want to see any comments that RFR has raised their Patreon levels and charging you more money. No,
we don't see
it's
that.
Not us. So in addition to Patreon and YouTube, you can follow us on our socials. You can check us out on X. You can check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and all those other ones that have spun off of those. But those are the big 3. And the website for everything and all things Rebel Force Radio, rebelforceradio.com. If you want to help us out, the best thing you can do in addition to Patreon is just doing what you're doing right now. It costs you nothing. Listen to the show each and every week. Listen to the after shows. Watch the YouTube highlights and suggest it, recommend it to your friends. So the Star Wars fan in your life, whether it be a coworker or a cousin or a friend, whoever it is, recommend RFR if they haven't heard of us by now. You can make a difference in their life and recommend Rebel Force Radio so they can start listening to it each and every week, and you can have discussions about it. It's great. That's a great way to help spread the word. If your podcatcher of choice allows you to do more than just subscribe, if it allows you to write a review, leave a review of this podcast, We'd love to have that review. Just one simple rule, please.
Make them good.
And that's going to do it for us this week. Long show. Hope you don't mind. It was a good time on this end. Hope you enjoy it. For more Rebel Force Radio, join us next week. And we'll see you next time. We'll get to those stories that we didn't get to this week. But boy, I mean, Kathleen Kennedy and the Andor Season 2 trailer, just too good. So we'll see you next time. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.
Okay, great.